Hello there, and welcome back to The Sleep Science, where the only thing more mysterious than the cosmos is why you always fall asleep halfway through my monologues. Tonight, though, you might actually want to stay awake for the opening stretch, because what if I told you that you weren't born here in the way you've always been taught? That maybe, just maybe, you were placed here, set down carefully like a figurine on a chessboard, inside a world that looks suspiciously ready-made for your kind. Of course, you probably won't survive this thought experiment without your brain overheating a little, but that's the fun of it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And since I'm nosy in the most relaxing way possible, tell me in the comments where you are listening from, and what time of night or day it is right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes on a shore that doesn't feel like it was randomly sculpted by eons of blind chaos. The sand seems too fine, each grain almost obedient in the way it cushions your steps. The air has the perfect balance of coolness and warmth, like a thermostat set by someone who actually cares about your comfort. Even the tide rolls in with theatrical timing, never too fast, never too slow, as if the ocean rehearsed this moment knowing you would be standing here. The horizon doesn't scream randomness, it whispers design. You take in a deep breath, and the air feels like it was tuned to your lungs, oxygen levels hovering in a sweet spot that makes you wonder, if you were dropped here, who calibrated the settings? It's not just the physical ease of breathing though. Look up, and you notice the sky is draped in a soft canvas of colour. Blues that dissolve into paler blues, the kind that Instagram filters try but fail to replicate. Birds sail across it in coordinated arcs, as though performing for your arrival. You can't help but feel like a guest in some open-air theatre. And that thought itches in the back of your mind. Guests don't build the stage, they're invited to it. As you walk further along the silent shore, you recall how ancient cultures often described humanity as newcomers. The Sumerians, for instance, told stories of beings descending from the heavens to teach humans how to live. Whether they meant literal sky gods or metaphorical forces of civilization is still debated, but the fact remains, people thousands of years ago felt placed here, not grown here. Historians still argue whether these myths were primitive stabs at science, or subtle memories of something stranger. The shore beneath your bare feet suddenly feels like the set of a drama far older than you. You pause, crouch down, and let a shell rest in your palm. Its spiral design is so precise it looks manufactured, but you know nature often outperforms even the best architects. Still, there's a creeping suspicion that this kind of symmetry isn't accidental. Fringe thinkers in the 1970s loved pointing out how Fibonacci sequences appeared everywhere, in shells, flowers, galaxies, as though the same blueprint kept reappearing, like a lazy programmer copy-pasting assets into a video game. Mainstream scientists will remind you that math simply describes patterns already baked into physics. But when you're standing alone, staring at a seashell that looks like it could double as alien jewellery, you can't help but wonder if math is less discovery and more reveal, a breadcrumb trail left for you to find. The wind shifts, carrying the faint smell of salt and something floral. You picture the Earth as an Airbnb stocked for a very specific kind of traveller. Fruit trees with edible sweetness, rivers running with potable water, animals tame enough to domesticate yet challenging enough to keep life interesting. Even mosquitoes, annoying as they are, could be viewed as tiny alarms, reminding you that paradise comes with fine print. It's like the designers of this habitat module wanted you comfortable, but not so comfortable that you'd stop asking questions. Every so often you glance over your shoulder at the ocean. The rhythm of the waves feels familiar, almost coded into your nervous system. You realise sailors throughout history must have felt the same hypnotic pull. Ancient Phoenicians once trusted these waters enough to cross entire seas with wooden ships barely held together by rope. The fact that humanity leapt into exploration so eagerly, with so little to protect them, almost suggests instinct, like migratory birds who just know which way to go. Historians still argue whether this drive to cross oceans was survival necessity or an inexplicable restlessness built into human design. Either way, the ocean keeps lapping, patient, like a guardian too polite to reveal its secrets. A crab scuttles past your foot. Its movements are precise, mechanical even, like a tiny drone in a metal shell. You chuckle, because if Earth really were designed, someone had a playful streak. Let's give them sideways walking armoured spiders, you imagine the cosmic project manager saying, laughing over a cup of coffee. This is the same design team, you figure, who thought giraffes would be funny, stretching a horse's neck like silly putty and pretending it makes biological sense. Quirks like this make you doubt pure survival was the only motive behind evolution. Maybe the placement, if it happened, came with Easter eggs, inside jokes scattered around the ecosystem. The further you walk, the more your senses tune into the orchestration. The distant forest hums with insects like a background track. The shoreline glitters with sunlight as though a spotlight operator is following your every step. Even the temperature of the sand seems balanced, warm but not blistering. Too perfect, you think, to be purely accidental. You remember the anthropic principle from late-night science podcasts, the idea that the universe looks fine-tuned because if it weren't, you wouldn't be here to notice. Philosophers argue endlessly about whether that's a profound truth or just the most boring tautology in existence. Still, as your toes sink into that Goldilocks warm sand, you can't help but side-eye the universe, as if it's winking at you. You stop at a driftwood log and sit, watching the horizon blur. Your thoughts drift to fringe theories, ancient astronaut enthusiasts claiming humans were seeded here as an experiment, test subjects placed in a biodome with just enough resources to thrive. Mainstream historians usually roll their eyes at these ideas, pointing out the lack of hard evidence. But even skeptics admit that Earth sometimes feels unusually generous. Bananas, for example, practically designed to be handheld snacks. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe part of the welcome basket. The waves keep their rhythm. The wind brushes your skin like a comforting hand. You feel both at home and not quite home, as though the planet is familiar but slightly uncanny. It's like renting a furnished apartment. Everything you need is here. Arranged logically, but you still sense the fingerprints of the landlord who set it all up before you arrived. Your eyelids grow heavy as you imagine the very first humans stepping onto a shore like this, looking around with the same mixture of awe and confusion. Did they wonder even then if the place was waiting for them? Did they feel, deep down, that they were guests in a carefully prepared habitat? The sand whispers no answer. The ocean keeps its secrets, and you, half smiling, half uneasy, continue to sit on that silent shore, trying to decide whether you are home or simply placed. The shoreline fades behind you, but the sky remains, stretching so wide it feels more like a ceiling than an atmosphere. You tilt your head back until your neck protests, and there it is, a vault of colour that seems far too composed to be the product of accidents. The blue isn't just a shade, it's a mood. Calming, spacious, oddly reassuring. As the day deepens, the sky starts to reveal its tricks. The blues soften, pinks gather at the edges, and you realise the whole thing behaves like an enormous theatre curtain, pulled open or shut at precisely the right times. If this really is a stage, then the sky is the production designer's masterpiece. You sit back and watch the clouds drift in lazy formations. Each one has its own identity. A sheep here, a half-finished dragon there, a clump that suspiciously looks like a pizza slice. You laugh softly, wondering whether your brain is hardwired to find meaning in shapes, or whether the clouds are deliberately arranged as little distractions to keep you entertained. Ancient Greeks thought clouds were messengers, sculpted by gods who couldn't resist doodling across the heavens. Historians still argue whether myths like these were poetic explanations of natural cycles, or coded records of something stranger. Either way, the sky has been a canvas of meaning since long before you stared up at it tonight. As the sun edges downward, the light becomes golden, painting everything in a hue that flatters even the crankiest human complexion. You can't help but notice how photogenic sunsets are, and how consistently they work, as though Earth was programmed with a built-in Instagram filter millennia before cameras existed. This makes you snicker. What if sunsets are just cosmic marketing? A little advertising trick to keep humans invested in the product? You think about the Egyptians who worshipped Ra as the sun god, charting his boat across the heavens each day. They didn't just see light, they saw choreography, the rising, the setting, the dependable repetition. Maybe they were onto something about performance value. The first star pricks into view, then another, and soon the sky is stitched with light. Constellations reveal themselves not as random scatterings, but as recognizable pictures, though of course you know your ancestors forced those shapes into being. The Big Dipper, Orion's Belt, the Pleiades cluster, all familiar landmarks. But there's something suspicious about how useful they turned out to be for navigation. Early sailors relied on them like GPS, steering across open seas with confidence. Historians still debate whether humanity's reliance on stars was simply practical genius, or whether there's something uncanny about how conveniently placed those stellar markers are. You lean back and think, if someone wanted to leave breadcrumbs, wouldn't they look exactly like this? It's funny. Astronomy often doubles as autobiography. The Babylonians carved star maps into clay, while the Chinese kept meticulous sky records for thousands of years. Each culture stared at the same lights and saw messages tailored to their own worries. Omens of war, signals of harvest, calendars of ritual. Even fringe theories crop up here, claiming constellations were arranged intentionally, like glow-in-the-dark stickers placed on a child's ceiling. Mainstream astronomers dismiss that idea, of course, pointing out the vast distances and chaotic processes behind stellar birth. Still, lying here under this immense dome, you can't shake the feeling of symmetry, of coherence, as though the stars agreed to play along. The moon begins its ascent, perfectly timed, as if responding to a stage cue. You notice how large it looks when it first hovers above the horizon. A swollen lantern glowing against the deepening blue. You know it's an optical illusion, your brain tricking you into seeing it as larger when framed by trees and rooftops. But illusions themselves can feel like design choices, can't they? Tricks built into the operating system, ensuring you're not just a passive observer, but a participant in the show. Ancient Chinese poets used to describe the moon as a shared companion, the one constant uniting distant lovers and wandering scholars. Even then, the sky wasn't just backdrop, it was script. The night matures. You begin to notice odd coincidences, like how the moon's size in the sky almost perfectly matches the sun's, allowing solar eclipses to be such a breathtaking spectacle. Out of billions of possible ratios, you live on the one planet where the geometry works out just right for this cosmic magic trick. Scientists call it coincidence. Fringe voices call it a clue. Historians still argue whether ancient eclipse records in Babylonian tablets were purely observational, or whether those scribes suspected a deeper intent. You sit in the cool grass, watching the moon glow, and can't help but feel as though you're under deliberate spotlighting. The temperature dips slightly, a gentle reminder that the curtain doesn't just look good, it functions. The atmosphere filters harmful rays, scatters light to make the sky blue, and shields you from most space debris. That's some serious multi-purpose design. You joke to yourself that if Earth really was created by contractors, they were definitely over budget but nailed the specs. Imagine the pitch meeting. Yes, it blocks radiation, provides breathable air, and doubles as a mood lighting system. No, we can't throw in Bluetooth connectivity. You stretch out flat, staring until your eyes blur. The Milky Way arches overhead, a hazy brushstroke smeared across darkness. You wonder if this view was meant to stir something, curiosity, or maybe even a sense of homesickness. After all, why show the galaxy in such grandeur if you're never supposed to leave? Maybe it's like a painting hung in a waiting room, something to keep you inspired, restless, yearning for whatever comes next. That itch to explore beyond Earth might not be random evolution, but a breadcrumb trail urging you onward. For a moment you close your eyes and just listen. The air is quiet except for the occasional cricket and the soft thud of your own heartbeat. You imagine early humans doing the same, lying under these same stars without electricity, without distraction. Did they also feel the suspicion of placement? Or did they accept the sky at face value, grateful for its light and rhythm? Perhaps both. Historians still argue whether prehistoric cave art that aligns with star patterns is coincidence or evidence of deliberate sky mapping. The debate hums on, while above you the stars twinkle indifferently, patient as ever. You open your eyes again and spot a shooting star streaking across the horizon. A cliché, sure, but satisfying. Your brain whispers, "Make a wish," and you laugh, because even the ritual of wishing on meteors feels scripted, like a line everyone knows in a play no one admits to rehearsing. What do you even wish for anyway? Proof that you belong here? Or confirmation that you were placed, that someone cared enough to arrange the curtains just so? As the night deepens, the sky wraps tighter around you, no longer ceiling, more like blanket. You notice the constellations have shifted slightly. evidence of Earth's rotation, a gentle reminder that the entire planet is moving while you lie still. That thought could be dizzying, but tonight it's oddly soothing, like being rocked in an invisible cradle. The stage doesn't just hold you, it carries you. And so you breathe, long and slow, watching the stars blink as if winking back. If this is a theatre, then the sky is both set and script, performance and projector. Whether placed by gods, programmed by simulations, or sculpted by chance, it plays its role flawlessly. You let your eyes drift shut again, trusting the curtain overhead to stay drawn, to hold the scene steady while you wander into dreams. The dawn creeps in quietly, peeling back the curtain of stars until the first hints of daylight wash over the horizon. You rub your eyes and sit up, the air cool but not unkind, and suddenly it strikes you again. This planet doesn't just feel habitable, it feels custom-built, as though you've been dropped into the ultimate survival simulation, except the settings were left on easy mode. Forests stretch in the distance, rivers snake with perfect generosity, and the climate hovers suspiciously close to the sweet spot for human comfort. Earth doesn't behave like an indifferent rock, it behaves like a module, a habitat. You stand, brushing dew from your legs, and begin to wander inland. Every step feels rehearsed. The soil beneath your feet is firm enough to walk on, yet soft enough to cushion your joints. The trees are spaced in a way that creates natural paths, not too tangled, not too barren. You could almost believe a landscaper came through with a cosmic rake. Even the temperature, mild, breathable, sits within the narrow band where humans thrive. It's as if the thermostat of the planet has been locked between too cold and too hot for your convenience. If this were a video game, you'd assume the developers made it this way to keep players from rage quitting in the tutorial zone. Your stomach growls faintly, and you notice the forest ahead bursting with fruit-bearing trees and edible-looking plants. Grapes dangle in tight purple clusters. A fig tree leans temptingly, its branches heavy with ripe fruit. You laugh under your breath because, come on, what are the odds? It's as if someone stocked the pantry before you arrived. Ancient stories echo in your mind, Eden, for instance, with its paradise garden fully equipped for human appetite. Historians still argue whether Eden was a literal place, a mythological metaphor, or perhaps even a memory of some kind of prepared habitat long forgotten. Whatever the truth, the resonance is hard to ignore. Your species has always suspected Earth was stocked with intention. You pluck a grape, cautious, and pop it into your mouth. Sweetness floods your tongue, almost too perfectly balanced between tart and sugary. You smirk, thinking about how evolution is supposed to explain this kind of compatibility. Plants evolved sugars to attract animals, animals evolved taste buds to crave sugars, and so on. A tidy dance of co-adaptation, but still, you can't shake the suspicion that the dance floor itself was built first, awaiting the dancers. Moving deeper into the forest, you hear birdsong weaving through the branches. The pitches vary like instruments in a symphony, and whether or not you know the species, the overall effect is the same: comfort. Sound designers in films add birdsong to signal safety, peace, normalcy. And here it is, built into the operating system of reality. Fringe theorists sometimes claim the very frequency of birdsong has calming effects on the human nervous system, as though engineered. Scientists counter that it's just association. Birds sing more when predators are scarce, so your brain relaxes. Still, whether by accident or intent, the sound fits so neatly into your biology that it feels suspiciously curated. You reach a clearing where a stream runs over smooth stones. Kneeling, you scoop water into your hands. It's cold, clean, and refreshingly drinkable. And here's the kicker. Your body is about 60% water, the same stuff you're now sipping. Coincidence, or part of the compatibility package? Ancient Romans built aqueducts to transport water across cities, engineering marvels that remain impressive even today. But the real marvel is that water was here in the first place, waiting. Historians still argue whether life shaped itself around water, or whether water is the universal medium seeded deliberately wherever life is meant to exist. You pat your lips dry and mutter, "Well, whoever stocked the fridge? Nice work." As you follow the stream, you notice how animals emerge cautiously, yet predictably. A deer flicks its ears, watching you before bounding away. Rabbits dart in and out of the underbrush. None of them are too threatening. Sure, Somewhere out there lurk wolves, snakes, maybe a bear. But most wildlife exists in a spectrum of edible, domesticatable, or at least avoidable. Compare that to, say, Venus, where the atmosphere could dissolve your lungs, or Jupiter, where the gravity would squash you flat. Earth feels like the one Airbnb where the host actually left fresh towels and coffee pods. You start to chuckle at the thought of Earth's amenities list. Gravity, manageable. Air, breathable. Temperature, tolerable. Food, abundant. Wi-Fi, okay, not included, but you can't win them all. The whole setup feels too deliberate. Even the bad stuff, like storms or mosquitoes, seem less like catastrophic flaws and more like gentle reminders that you're not supposed to get too comfortable. Every classroom, after all, needs the occasional pop quiz. Your walk leads you to a rise where the forest breaks into open meadow. The sun is climbing higher now, and its warmth grazes your skin without scorching. You remember hearing about the habitable zone, that delicate band around a star where water stays liquid and life can thrive. Astronomers call it the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold. Earth sits right there, like a carefully positioned lounge chair under a cosmic umbrella. Historians still argue whether calling it just right is mere human projection, or whether the odds truly are as astronomical as they seem. Either way, you find yourself lying back in the grass, gazing at the sun, half convinced it was angled just for you. The meadow hums with life. Bees trace zigzags between wildflowers, pollinating with uncanny diligence. You can't help but admire the arrangement. Plants need bees need plants, humans need both. It's an ecological jigsaw puzzle where every piece clicks into place. Fringe thinkers like to claim the interdependence looks like design rather than accident, like someone carefully testing the system for sustainability before pressing the go button. Mainstream ecologists argue the opposite. Given enough time, natural selection naturally knits these patterns. The debate lingers, but lying here under the soft drone of bees, you can't deny it feels functional, tidy, suspiciously well-tuned. Your thoughts drift to ancient civilizations again. Consider the Maya, who built entire calendars around agricultural cycles, observing with precision how the Earth's rhythms aligned with human survival. Their pyramids even cast shadows at solstices, timed to celestial mechanics. Did they suspect placement? Or did they simply admire the gears of a machine they were trapped inside? Historians still argue whether those alignments were scientific or spiritual, or perhaps both. Either way, their obsession with harmony suggests they too sensed Earth as a module, a stage set with clockwork precision. You sigh, stretching your arms wide, the grass tickles your skin, and the scent of wild herbs drifts upward. Your body fits into this environment like a puzzle piece, the right size for the terrain, the right metabolism for the food, the right lungs for the air. Evolutionary biology says this is adaptation, slow and grinding across millions of years. But part of you wonders, what if it's the other way around? What if the stage was built first, waiting for the actors to arrive, costumes and scripts already prepared? The sun shifts again, casting light across the meadow, and you notice how your body responds instinctively. Circadian rhythm, melatonin levels rising and falling like tides, synced perfectly with the planet's 24-hour spin. It feels less like coincidence and more like calibration. Ancient Egyptians used obelisks as sundials, measuring time from the sun's movement. You realise now that their monuments weren't just timekeepers, they were acknowledgements of synchronization, proof that human life ticked to Earth's metronome. Historians still argue whether humans shaped themselves around Earth's rhythms, or whether Earth shaped itself for humans. The argument loops endlessly, like a clock's hand circling back to noon. A breeze ripples through the grass, cooling your skin just before the sun grows too warm. You chuckle softly. It's almost polite. You think of Earth as a host, attentive but not indulgent. Enough food to eat, but not too much. Enough warmth to comfort, but not without sunburn lurking as a reminder. Even disasters, storms, earthquakes, droughts, could be viewed as scheduled drills, stress tests in the habitat module. It's frustrating, yes, but also suspiciously educational. You close your eyes and imagine a cosmic checklist being ticked. Breathable atmosphere, check. Stable orbit, check. Protective magnetic field, check. Varied terrain to keep things interesting, check. Occasional meteors for dramatic tension, check. The picture forms, Earth is less random accident and more survival simulator, built to challenge but not annihilate, to shelter but not smother. The meadow quiets. You breathe deeply, feeling the planet hum beneath you, like the faint vibration of a massive engine running in the distance. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's everything. Either way, you drift into that feeling, suspended between gratitude and suspicion. This world doesn't just sustain you, it seems to invite you, coax you, maybe even test you. And lying there, belly warm from the sun, ears full of bees and birds, you can't help but think, if Earth is a module, then someone somewhere wanted you to survive here. The meadow lingers behind you, but the thought of balance clings to your mind like burrs on your clothes. You keep walking, and with every step you can't help noticing how everything about this planet seems calibrated, as if Earth were chosen from a catalogue of worlds with a little golden sticker slapped on the cover, just right. The Goldilocks puzzle, scientists like to call it, though you suspect the fairy tale was never meant to describe planetary physics, not too hot, not too cold. Earth exists in a narrow band of perfection that feels almost insulting in its convenience. The sun overhead proves the point. Your distance from it, roughly 93 million miles, means you're warm enough to thrive but not roasted alive. A few million miles closer and you'd be Venus, wrapped in sulfur clouds and baking hotter than an oven. A few million miles further and you'd be Mars, shivering under a thin, failing atmosphere. Yet here you stand, perfectly placed in the cosmic recliner, sipping sunlight like it was brewed for you. Coincidence, they say. Coincidence, you repeat, though the word tastes increasingly hollow. You pause by a patch of shade, letting the idea sink in. The orbit is circular enough to avoid wild temperature swings, tilted just right at 23.5 degrees to deliver seasons instead of eternal monotony. That tilt brings harvests, migrations, holidays, entire cultures spun from the rhythm of equinox and solstice. Ancient druids even built Stonehenge to track the sun's path, aligning monoliths with summer dawn and winter dusk. Historians still argue whether Stonehenge was a ritual temple, a celestial calendar, or just the world's heaviest garden decor. Whatever its purpose, it proves your ancestors noticed the balance too. They felt the puzzle long before anyone gave it a catchy nickname. You continue walking, and the ground slopes into a valley where a river winds lazily. It glitters under sunlight, liquid mirrors catching your reflection. Water, again with the perfection. It's the only substance on Earth that expands when frozen, which means ice floats. If it didn't, lakes and oceans would freeze from the bottom up, suffocating life under slabs of solid death. Instead, ice caps float, insulating the water below, allowing fish and plants to survive winters. That quirk alone makes the difference between extinction and abundance. You shake your head, muttering, "That's a suspiciously lucky bug in the code." You scoop another handful of water and let it run through your fingers, thinking about the fragile band of atmospheric pressure holding it liquid. Too little, and it evaporates into space. Too much, and it crushes you. Instead, Earth's pressure sits in the sweet spot. Your blood doesn't boil, your lungs don't collapse, and you can sip this river without the drama of physics ending your story early. Fringe thinkers love to point out how many dials had to be set exactly right. Mainstream physicists remind you of the multiverse hypothesis. If infinite universes exist, some are bound to get lucky, and you're just in one of them. Historians still argue whether ancient cosmologies, with their countless overlapping heavens, were early stabs at the same idea. Your feet squish into soft mud near the riverbank, grounding you in the puzzle. Even mud has a role, fertile, clingy, capable of supporting crops. You imagine the first farmers crouching like you, hands in the soil, realizing that food could be grown with predictability. The Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, birthplace of agriculture. And what's agriculture really, but proof that Earth's settings were just right for the leap from wandering hunter to settled builder? Civilizations didn't invent the Goldilocks zone, they inherited it, like tenants moving into an apartment with utilities already running. You sit on a rock, letting the sun dry your damp hands and tilt your gaze upward again. The atmosphere is another riddle piece. Nitrogen, oxygen, trace gases, arranged in a ratio that's not lethal, not suffocating, but energizing. Oxygen at 21% is enough to sustain metabolism, yet not so much that the planet spontaneously combusts at every lightning strike. That's a razor-thin margin, a dial tuned with unnerving precision. Imagine it set to 30%, you'd be firewood. Imagine 10%, you'd be gasping like a fish. Instead, the gauge sits steady in the middle, an almost arrogant act of balance. You laugh softly, remembering the cheeky way life always brags about its adaptability. Penguins in Antarctica, camels in deserts, microbes in boiling springs. But adaptability only works because the core conditions allow it. You can dress up in parka or swimsuit all you want, but without breathable air, liquid water and moderate gravity, you're toast. Or rather, just dust. It's like boasting you can handle any hotel room when the real trick is that the building hasn't collapsed. Walking again, you crest a hill that overlooks miles of green rolling outward. You picture Earth as a classroom with carefully designed seating, mountains for drama, plains for food, oceans for mystery. Everything spaced in ways that invite curiosity without crushing hope. Fringe theorists sometimes claim this is evidence of terraforming, that Earth was deliberately tuned to support life rather than accidentally falling into place. Scientists shrug and point to planetary formation models, where chaos and math play dice until a world lands in the right slot. Historians still argue whether myths of gods shaping clay into landscapes were poetic memory or subconscious acknowledgement of a truth bigger than they could name. The wind tousles your hair, and you notice again how mild it is, fast enough to cool, slow enough not to knock you flat. Another just right setting. You grin, thinking about Goldilocks herself, a character who had no business breaking and entering but somehow became the face of cosmic balance. If Earth is the porridge, you're the uninvited guest who showed up, tasted it and decided to stay. You settle under a tree, the bark rough against your back, and let the thoughts swirl deeper. Every statistic you've ever heard about cosmic odds comes to mind. The narrow band of habitable temperatures, the precarious orbit, the magnetic shield, the chemical soup, the improbable timing of evolution. It's all so finely aligned it feels like winning the lottery not once, but every single morning you wake up. You roll your eyes at yourself, muttering, "Either I'm ridiculously lucky, or somebody stacked the deck." A squirrel scrambles along a branch above you, pausing to stare as if to say, "You too, huh?" You smile, because animals thrive under these same balances, sharing the same module. Humanity might fancy itself special, but squirrels, bees and fish all ride the Goldilocks wave. Maybe that's the real puzzle. Not that Earth fits humans, but that it fits so many species at once. A shared stage, perfectly lit, endlessly rehearsed. Your mind wanders back to those who first noticed the puzzle consciously, the philosophers of ancient Greece. Aristotle believed everything on Earth existed with purpose, teleology woven into its essence. Later, thinkers like Copernicus and Galileo shattered the illusion of human centrality. But even they couldn't deny the uncanny fitness of the planet. Historians still argue whether philosophy merely dressed up human bias or brushed against something genuinely mysterious. Either way, the Goldilocks zone has haunted thinkers across centuries, a riddle whispered by the world itself. The afternoon light shifts golden, shadows stretching like lazy cats across the grass. You yawn, sinking deeper into the comfort of the moment. Balance seeps into your very bones. The air, the light, the warmth. You think about how fragile the puzzle really is, how a single asteroid could reset the board, how a few degrees of temperature change could turn meadows into deserts. Maybe that's the point. The habitat isn't permanent, it's conditional. A puzzle to be appreciated precisely because it could fall apart. You close your eyes, listening to the rustle of leaves, the soft murmur of the river below. Earth hums along, balanced between extremes, daring you to question whether it's luck, design, or both. And as you drift, half in thought, half in dream, you realize the puzzle isn't about porridge or chairs at all. It's about you, sitting here, marveling at how the universe managed to get the recipe just right. The balance of the Goldilocks world still lingers in your thoughts as you wander into the deeper folds of memory and story. Because here's the thing, humans have always suspected that placement wasn't random. Long before telescopes or equations, people explained their presence with myths, those sprawling poetic breadcrumbs scattered across cultures like notes from someone trying to tell you, hey, you weren't just dropped here by accident. You picture a fire flickering in some ancient cave, the smoke curling toward the ceiling while a storyteller leans forward, eyes glinting. The tale isn't just entertainment, It's a map of belonging. The Sumerians, often called the world's first civilization, spoke of the Anunnaki, sky beings who descended to teach humanity knowledge. To modern ears, it sounds like gods playing schoolteacher. To fringe thinkers, it's an alien placement story wearing mythological clothes. Historians still argue whether these were literal accounts, symbolic narratives, or something in between. But either way, the Sumerians weren't describing themselves as self-made. They were describing themselves as positioned. You continue walking through the imagined forest of history, and the branches overhead seem alive with whispers from other traditions. The Greeks, for instance, believed humans were moulded from clay by Prometheus, a craftsman who stole fire to give his creations life. Clay, fire, placement. It reads like a recipe. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the god Khnum spun human forms on a potter's wheel, shaping them as an artisan shapes vessels. The theme repeats: humans crafted, not sprouted, arranged, not stumbled. These stories weren't science, but they were suspiciously consistent in their suggestion of external hands at work. Further east, in India, the Rig Veda tells of Purusha, the cosmic giant whose body was sacrificed to create the world and its inhabitants. From his mouth came priests, from his arms warriors, from his legs workers, and from his feet the servants. A myth of placement, not in a garden this time, but within a body as cosmos blueprint. Fringe readers love to point out how eerie it is that cultures oceans apart kept describing humanity as emerging from outside intention. Mainstream scholars counter that myth is just the natural human tool for explaining existence before microscopes and telescopes. Historians still argue whether those repeated motifs across cultures point to coincidence, archetype, or some kind of collective memory. You sit for a while on a mossy rock, letting the stories weave themselves like vines around your imagination. They're charming, yes, but they also sting a little. If you really were placed here, maybe the myths are less invention and more faint memory. Blurred snapshots passed down until details dissolved into symbols. It's like remembering a dream where you can't quite grasp the edges, so you tell it in metaphor. Your eyes drift to the horizon, and you remember how Native American traditions also carried these breadcrumbs. The Navajo speak of the first world, the Black World, from which beings climbed upward through successive worlds until they reached this one. The Hopi speak of emergence from underground chambers, guided by deities. Again, placement is implied. You don't just appear, you're ushered, lifted, guided into this layer of existence. These aren't random campfire stories, they're instructions, like faded manuals reminding you that you might not be in the original showroom. You smile faintly, recalling how the Norse people spun their own mythic thread. Humans, they said, were carved from driftwood by the gods Odin, Vili and Ve, Ask and Embla, the first man and woman shaped deliberately from ash and elm trees. Driftwood placed onto shore, carved into bodies. Even here the theme repeats: intention, crafting, positioning. It's almost comical how many cultures agreed you were fashioned, not sprouted like weeds. Maybe everyone was reading from the same hidden syllabus. Of course, you remind yourself, myth isn't evidence, it's art. It's human imagination filling in the blanks where knowledge was missing. Historians often caution against taking myth literally, pointing out that creation tales also served political, moral and cultural purposes. Still, you can't help noticing that even if the details differ wildly, giants, clay, potter's wheels, sky gods, the underlying intuition remains the same. Someone, something, put you here. The wind rustles through the trees around you, and you imagine it carrying voices from forgotten times. Picture a Babylonian priest scanning the skies, convinced that the movements of planets were coded instructions. Picture a shaman chanting by firelight, guiding the tribe through a story of descent or emergence. Picture an Egyptian scribe carving onto stone, embedding the notion of cosmic order, all breadcrumbs, scattered like constellations pointing vaguely toward the suspicion of placement. Historians still argue whether these shared motifs reflect Jungian archetypes, deep psychological structures common to all humans, or whether they're fragments of actual memory encoded in culture. A squirrel darts across your path, clutching an acorn as though it too carries a secret to bury. You chuckle softly, thinking about how myths act the same way, small seeds of meaning tucked into stories, waiting to sprout centuries later in someone else's imagination. You can't resist wondering if the storytellers themselves knew what they were doing, or if they were just transcribing whispers from something they barely understood. You think about the quirks, the fringe tidbits, the things that make you raise your eyebrows, like the Dogon people of Mali, whose mythology included knowledge of the Sirius star system long before telescopes confirmed the details. Mainstream scholars argue that this knowledge might have been picked up from contact with Western astronomers, but the fringe crowd insists it proves ancient memory of cosmic visitors. Either way, the fact that myths sometimes contain oddly precise astronomical data is enough to give you pause. Were these breadcrumbs, or just accidents dressed up as mysteries? You wander further into your thoughts, brushing against the edge of the Mayan creation stories in the Popol Vuh. According to the tale, humans were first formed from mud, then wood, and finally from maize, the corn that sustained their people. Failed prototypes, revised models, until finally the right material was chosen. If you think about it, that's placement language too. Trials, errors, a workshop of existence. You grin, imagining cosmic engineers scratching their heads. Nope, mud body's too flimsy, wood body's too hollow, let's try corn, perfect. The sun above you filters through branches, dappling the ground in shifting patterns. It feels like myth itself, fragmented, beautiful, incomplete. You realise that for all their differences, these stories share one thing. Humans rarely saw themselves as random products of chance. They saw themselves as chosen, crafted, or delivered. It wasn't until modern science came along with its long timelines and gradual evolution that the idea of randomness truly dominated. And even now, science hasn't erased the old whispers, it just argues louder over them. You lean back, sighing, letting the myths wash over you like waves. Whether clay or corn, sky gods or potter's wheels, the imagery varies, but the intuition is steady. Placement. You are set here, placed like a chess piece on a pre-drawn board. The breadcrumbs may be confusing, scattered, even contradictory, but they lead in one direction. Humanity always suspected the stage was set before the actors arrived. The breeze cools, shadows lengthen, and you feel that strange blend of comfort and unease again. Comfort, because the stories suggest you belong. Unease, because if you were placed, then by whom? And for what? You realise the breadcrumbs are not just trails but riddles, clues that tease but never quite answer, and so you keep walking, following them deeper into the forest of human imagination, half hoping the next clearing will reveal more of the truth. The forest of myth recedes, but as you step forward, stone rises to meet you. Not pebbles or natural cliffs, shapes too deliberate, too stubbornly geometric. Towers, walls, staircases leading to nowhere. Humanity's fingerprints press into the landscape in the form of architecture, and suddenly you realise that myths weren't the only breadcrumbs left behind. The structures themselves are echoes, hard evidence that someone at some point wanted to leave reminders. Placement, it seems, is written not only in stories but in stone. You picture the pyramids of Giza standing against the desert horizon. Enormous triangles of limestone, sharp enough in their day to gleam under the Egyptian sun like mirrors for the gods. They weren't just tombs, no matter how often textbooks flattened them into that role. They were statements. Their alignment with the stars, especially Orion's belt, suggests someone was obsessed with mapping heaven onto Earth. Historians still argue whether the pyramids were purely funerary projects or attempts to anchor cosmic order into stone. Either way, they are monuments to the suspicion that Earth itself was staged, that human lives needed architectural exclamation points to remind them. You walk through an imagined corridor of those pyramids, the stones towering above. Each block weighs tons, yet they were stacked with such precision that even today you could barely slip a credit card between them. Fringe theories have long speculated about lost technologies, or even outside assistance, aliens lending a hand with interstellar cranes. Mainstream Egyptology rolls its eyes and insists it was engineering brilliance plus thousands of labourers. But admit it, some part of you wonders whether those smooth surfaces were meant to echo something more than power, something like a marker, a cosmic breadcrumb left in plain sight. Leaving the desert, you wander into the misty green of Salisbury Plain. There stands Stonehenge, the weathered ring of monoliths stubborn against centuries of wind and rain. Unlike the pyramids, Stonehenge doesn't tower, it invites. The circle aligns with solstices, the stones framing sunrise and sunset like a calendar built from boulders. Who dragged these stones for miles? Why align them with the heavens? Historians still argue whether it was a temple, a burial ground, or a clock. Fringe enthusiasts claim it was a landing pad or a signal station. You, standing at the centre, can't help but feel that it was at least a message. Someone wanted to make sure future eyes noticed the sky was worth watching. Further along, your mind's journey takes you across the ocean to the jungles of Mesoamerica. Here, Mayan and Aztec pyramids climb like stone stairways to heaven, each step carrying not only bodies but cosmology. At Chichen Itza, the pyramid of Kukulkan casts a serpent-shaped shadow during the equinox, a writhing illusion slithering down the staircase. Its theatre carved from limestone, celestial mathematics turned into architecture. Was this coincidence? Or deliberate proof that someone, or something, wanted humans to remember the choreography of the heavens? Historians still argue whether these alignments were practical agricultural markers or evidence of obsession with cosmic placement. Either way, the message was loud. You are living inside a designed module. You laugh softly, imagining the architects as cosmic interns. Hey, don't forget to add the snake shadow feature. The boss loves that one. The humour doesn't erase the awe though. These structures weren't built with bulldozers or cranes. They were built with will, vision, and perhaps a lingering memory that placement was part of the story. Walking further, you stumble across other stone whispers. The statues of Easter Island, their enormous heads gazing at the horizon as though waiting for something or someone. Each figure carved with detail, placed deliberately, all facing outward. Historians still argue whether they were ancestors watching over their people, territorial markers, or cosmic signals. Fringe theorists grin knowingly, suggesting they were messages left for whoever placed us here in the first place. You tilt your head and admit, the effect is uncanny. They look less like decorations and more like sentries guarding a mystery. Travelling north in your mind, you arrive at the ancient city of Teotihuacan in Mexico. Its Avenue of the Dead stretches in a straight line, flanked by massive pyramids named for the sun and the moon. Their layout, some argue, mirrors the positions of celestial bodies. Walking down that avenue, you'd feel dwarfed, not just by stone but by scale, the sense that you were being reminded of your smallness against a grander stage. Was this simply human ambition, or another breadcrumb trail, architecture whispering that you were part of a larger design? Even in Asia, the echoes continue. Angkor Wat in Cambodia, for example, aligns not only with the sun but also with the stars. Its sprawling complex mirrors, constellations, a celestial map anchored into the jungle. Historians still argue whether it was merely devotion to gods or a coded message of cosmic placement. The symmetry feels excessive if the point was only worship. Excessive unless the point was also to remind, to hint, to leave proof. Closer to the present, you think about cathedrals in Europe. Their spires reaching like fingers into the sky, stained glass flooding interiors with calculated shafts of light. Even here, the suspicion lingers. Placement isn't just divine, it's architectural. Humans felt compelled to build reminders in stone that they belonged to a world staged for them, a world where light itself could be harnessed to make a sermon without words. The quirky fringe tidbits pile up as you wander. The Baalbek stones in Lebanon, enormous blocks weighing hundreds of tons, their purpose still uncertain. The Nazca lines in Peru, giant geoglyphs only visible from the sky, depicting animals and patterns. Who were those for? People walking on the ground couldn't even see them properly. Historians still argue whether they were ceremonial, astronomical, or artistic. But you can't ignore the possibility that they were designed to be viewed from above, breadcrumbs for watchers, not walkers. You pause and sit against one of these imagined stones, tracing cracks with your fingers. Architecture, you realise, isn't just shelter, it's communication. These echoes of placement aren't just proof of human ingenuity, they're reminders of suspicion. Suspicion that you were never alone, never random, never unobserved. You let your head rest back, and you think about how civilizations across time independently felt compelled to connect earth and sky through stone. They dragged rocks across deserts, carved statues from mountains, etched lines into plains. The impulse was global, relentless, unified in its aim, to leave a mark that said, "We knew." The shadows lengthen as you sit there, listening to the silent testimony of stone. Whether tomb, temple, or signal, each structure is a breadcrumb that refuses to erode completely. And as the air cools, you realise that maybe architecture itself is humanity's subconscious confession. We've always suspected we were placed here. So we built monuments, hoping the placer might someday notice we noticed. You leave the stone monuments behind, though in truth they never really leave you. Their weight clings, not just in stone but in thought. Markers, reminders, echoes. Yet as impressive as stacked blocks and carved faces are, the real architecture of placement isn't built from limestone or granite. It's written inside you, in the spiraled blueprint of your own cells. If Earth is a habitat module, then DNA is the software pre-installed, the ultimate manual slipped quietly into every living thing. You stretch your arms and glance at your hands, those familiar tools of exploration. Every skin cell carries a full copy of the code, 3 billion base pairs, each a chemical letter arranged in a script so elegant and maddeningly complex that scientists are still decoding its grammar. When Francis Crick and James Watson announced the double helix in 1953, it was hailed as the secret of life. And yes, it explained so much, but it also deepened the puzzle. Why does the code look so coded? Historians still argue whether early descriptions of DNA as language and instruction were metaphors or accidental truths. You walk along a grassy ridge, picturing DNA strands unspooling like ribbons in the wind. Every gene is a line of instruction, turning proteins into organs, eyes, skin, thought. It's not random soup. It's structured, algorithmic, almost suspiciously tidy. Fringe theorists often point out that DNA operates like computer code, complete with error correction, redundancy, and the ability to replicate. Mainstream biologists insist that's just metaphor. Evolution naturally shapes efficient systems. Still, you can't help but feel like someone, somewhere, sat at a cosmic keyboard. You pause to remember a quirky fact. About 8% of your DNA isn't even human in origin, but viral, leftovers from ancient infections that fused with your genome. Parasites of the past now function as part of you. Some of these viral insertions even play roles in things like placenta development. Imagine that. Your very ability to be born depends on genetic graffiti left by ancient viruses. Fringe thinkers leap on this as evidence of tinkering, as though someone hacked the code. Historians still argue whether mythic references to divine breath or gifts of life could be distant memories of such strange insertions. The path leads you down into a valley where wildflowers scatter colour across the grass. You crouch, pluck one, and think about its DNA. Different letters, different sequences, but still the same alphabet. Every living thing on Earth speaks the same language of 4 nucleotides: A, T, C, and G. From oak trees to elephants, from plankton to people, all coded with the same universal script. That alone feels suspicious. If life arose independently in different ways, wouldn't we expect multiple alphabets? Instead, everything shares the same software, as though the planet was booted with one operating system and never updated. You lean back, twirling the flower between your fingers. It's charming, sure, but also unsettling. Imagine buying a new laptop and finding every program, every file, every system, all written in the same programming language, no matter the manufacturer. You'd start to suspect some shared developer lurking in the background. Scientists call it the universal genetic code. Fringe thinkers call it proof of design. Historians still argue whether early myths about the word or sacred syllables were poetic hints of this biological language. Your thoughts drift to one of the strangest details: the mitochondria. These tiny organelles inside your cells carry their own DNA, separate from yours, inherited only from your mother. They act like little power plants, fueling every heartbeat, every breath. But why do they have their own code? The dominant theory says they were once free-living bacteria that got absorbed into larger cells, a symbiotic merger that worked so well it became permanent. Fringe interpretations? That they look suspiciously like modular add-ons plugged into the system for efficiency. Historians still argue whether ancient tales of divine sparks or gifts of fire might faintly echo humanity's first brush with cellular upgrades. You stroll further and think about how humans are nearly identical in genetic makeup to chimpanzees, about 98% the same. Yet look around. Humans build cathedrals, write symphonies, split atoms. Chimps throw sticks, sometimes with admirable aim, but they don't launch telescopes. That small percentage difference, those subtle tweaks in the code, create a canyon between species. Fringe theorists wonder if those tweaks were nudged deliberately, a placement upgrade version 2.0. Mainstream biologists point to evolutionary pressure and brain expansion. Historians still argue whether myths of gods breathing life into clay were intuitive ways of explaining that sudden leap. You sit beside a tree, letting your mind unravel like DNA itself. Genes don't just build bodies, they carry memory, traces of migration patterns, adaptations to altitude, resistances to disease. Your very blood remembers paths your ancestors walked. The Sami people of northern Europe, for instance, carry adaptations for extreme cold. Tibetans carry genetic tweaks that let them breathe comfortably at high altitudes. It's as though humanity was deliberately equipped for different modules within the module, survival kits coded into the hardware. You laugh softly, thinking of one of the quirkiest genetic leftovers, the ability to digest milk as adults. For most of human history, drinking milk past childhood was a digestive disaster. Then, in some populations, a mutation spread that allowed lactose tolerance. Now, half the world enjoys ice cream without regret, and the other half curses biology. It feels like a software patch rolled out mid-game. Who pushes those updates, you wonder? Evolution? Or maybe the same cosmic landlord who stocked the fridge with bananas and grapes? The tree rustles above you, dropping a leaf into your lap. Its veins look like the branching of rivers, like lightning, like fractals repeating across scales. DNA works the same way. Patterns within patterns, endlessly self-similar. Historians still argue whether this fractal order is a byproduct of physics or a sign of deeper mathematics running beneath everything. You trace the leaf and murmur, it's all code, isn't it? Your thoughts flicker to fringe speculations. The idea that DNA itself might be a form of information carrier, not just for biology but for memory across civilizations. Some suggest it could hold messages, encoded instructions waiting to be discovered. Mainstream scientists call that pseudoscience, but you can't deny the poetry of the idea that maybe buried in your own cells lies a breadcrumb trail left by whoever placed you here. The valley grows quieter as twilight approaches, the light softening into gold. You breathe deeply, feeling your chest rise and fall, powered by a code you never asked to inherit but rely on every second. You realize you're not just living in a habitat module, you are one. Your body a capsule coded for survival, and deep inside, in every double helix, lies the echo of placement, a whisper repeating across generations, you were written here. The valley fades into twilight, and the whisper of DNA still hums at the back of your mind. Code inside the body, code beneath the stars, placement written in spirals. But when you stop and really think about it, there's another code that feels just as uncanny, one that doesn't live in your cells but in your mouth, your ears, your brain. Language. If DNA is the hardware script, then language is the operating system update, the plug-in that lets you actually run this module called Earth. And the more you look at it, the stranger it seems that humans were given such an extravagant tool, a cheat code disguised as conversation. You let your thoughts stretch back to the first words you ever spoke, the clumsy syllables that your parents celebrated as though you had just reinvented electricity. From the very beginning, language felt natural, too natural almost, like it was waiting inside you to be unlocked. No one remembers consciously deciding to start speaking. It just erupts, toddlers stitching together subject and verb like they've been practicing off stage. Historians still argue whether language emerged gradually through grunts and gestures or whether it burst forth in a kind of sudden leap. Either way, it doesn't feel accidental. It feels suspiciously ready-made. You walk along a path lined with fireflies, their glowing signals flickering in patterns, and you think, animals communicate too, but never like this. Dolphins whistle, bees dance, wolves howl. Yet human speech carries infinite flexibility. You can describe what happened yesterday, or invent a city that doesn't exist, or explain quantum mechanics badly at a dinner party. Language doesn't just exchange information, it bends reality, stretches imagination, builds worlds out of sound. Why us? Why here? It's as though placement came with a deluxe communication package while the rest of the planet got the trial version. You pause and chuckle, remembering the Tower of Babel story. In the book of Genesis, humans build a tower to reach heaven, and God, unimpressed with their ambition, scatters their tongues into countless languages so they can't cooperate so easily. Fringe interpreters love to say this myth hints at external manipulation, a deliberate software scramble. Mainstream theologians see it as metaphor for human pride. Historians still argue whether the story encodes a memory of real cultural divergence or whether it's simply moral theatre. But the idea lingers. Language isn't just natural, it can be tweaked, split, modified. The fireflies buzz away, leaving you in a quiet clearing where your own thoughts echo loudest. You think about how all languages, no matter how different, share certain structures. Nouns, verbs, the basic logic of grammar, even signed languages follow similar rules. Linguists call this universal grammar, and some argue it's hardwired into the human brain. If that's true, it's like you were born with a blueprint for talking, a pre-installed app that only needed activation. It doesn't feel like random evolution so much as a feature deliberately written into the species. You kneel, tracing symbols into the dirt with a stick. Shapes that mean nothing now but could mean something if someone agreed on them. Writing, that's another level of the trick. Spoken words vanish into air, but writing pins them down, turning sound into symbol, breath into permanence. Sumerians scratching cuneiform into clay tablets. Egyptians chiseling hieroglyphs into stone. Placement wasn't just physical, it was linguistic. People were compelled to preserve their voices as though they knew, instinctively, that words were more than tools. They were breadcrumbs. A breeze brushes past you, carrying faint echoes of stories from every corner of the globe. Homer reciting the Iliad in Greece, griots in West Africa keeping genealogies alive through song, monks in Europe illuminating manuscripts by candlelight, each culture leaning on language not just to communicate but to remember. Historians still argue whether oral traditions are reliable or too malleable to trust, but the fact that humans built entire civilizations on the scaffolding of words proves their placement depended as much on tongue as on tool. You grin, thinking about the quirkier side of language, the oddities that suggest someone had a sense of humour when they programmed it. Like how the English word set has more definitions than any other, or how some languages have words untranslatable into others, like the Portuguese saudade, meaning a deep nostalgic longing. Fringe thinkers sometimes claim untranslatable words hint at different modules of perception, as if cultures were calibrated to notice distinct features of reality. Mainstream linguists shake their heads and chalk it up to cultural context. Still, you can't help but imagine the cosmic developer slipping Easter eggs into the dictionary. You wander deeper, thinking of language's power not just to share but to control. Politicians spin rhetoric, advertisers sculpt slogans, lovers whisper promises, all bending perception with strings of sound. George Orwell once warned in 1984 that limiting language could limit thought. He might not have known it, but he was hinting at something profound. If language is a plug-in, then whoever edits it edits reality. Placement doesn't just happen in where you live, but in how you're able to describe living. Your steps crunch softly against fallen leaves, and you think about another debate that lingers even now. Did language shape the brain, or did the brain shape language? Did placement come with speech already loaded, or did humans cobble it together as they went? Historians still argue fiercely, citing fossils of early hominid skulls to estimate when vocal cords became sophisticated enough. But fossils don't tell you when stories started. Stories, like myths, slip between science and memory, too fluid to pin down. Above you, the moon glows faintly, and you think about how language also reaches upward. Every culture used words to name stars, constellations, planets. Words stitched meaning onto the heavens, turning random lights into hunters, bears, maidens. It wasn't enough to just look. You had to name, to narrate. Placement felt incomplete without speech to describe it. You smile at a silly thought. What if Earth is actually a giant escape room, and language was the only key left behind? All the myths, the monuments, the genetic code, they're puzzles, and speech is the only way to share solutions. It would explain why humans can't stop telling stories, even when no one is listening. Stories are the instinctual way of leaving breadcrumbs for whoever comes next. The clearing grows quiet. You whisper a word aloud just to hear it. The sound vibrates in your throat, fills the space, then vanishes. Something so fleeting, yet it carries the power to shift minds, to ignite revolutions, to soothe a child. Placement without language would have been like handing you a planet without instructions. With it, you were given not only survival, but the ability to dream out loud. You lie back on the grass, staring at the sky, and realize the real trick is not that humans can speak, it's that they can't stop. Language pours endlessly, even when you're alone, even when you're asleep, dreaming in whispers no one else can hear. If DNA was the script written into your body, language was the voice that ensured the play could be performed. And lying there in the night, words still tumbling in your mind, you can't help but feel that the placement wasn't silent. It came with subtitles. You roll onto your side in the grass, stomach grumbling softly, and suddenly it hits you. Placement isn't only written in myths or DNA or language, it's also in your kitchen, or, more precisely, in the fact that you can have a kitchen at all. Food, the one thing you can't live without, seems oddly prearranged to suit you. Too well, really. It's as if Earth came with a stocked pantry, waiting for you to figure out how to cook. You sit up and imagine the first human who cracked open a nut or bit into a peach. Sweetness sliding across the tongue, protein filling the belly, water hidden inside flesh. Your body doesn't just tolerate these things, it craves them, like keys fitting locks already built into you. Historians still argue whether early agriculture was accidental, grains sprouting where seeds were dropped, or deliberate, guided by uncanny knowledge. Either way, the fit between human need and Earth's offering seems suspiciously tight. Take wheat, for example. You wander along a path and imagine fields of golden grain swaying in the wind. Not too bitter, not too fibrous, but just right for grinding into flour, baking into bread. Bread. The food so universal that entire civilizations are defined by it. Ancient Egyptians left recipes scratched on tomb walls. Romans distributed loaves to citizens as part of politics. A world without wheat feels almost unimaginable, and yet here it is, conveniently abundant, just waiting for humans to notice. You pick a stalk of imagined wheat, rub the kernels free and smile at the thought that it had to be domesticated. It didn't survive well without human hands. Wheat and people locked into a codependency, each making the other thrive. Fringe thinkers point to this relationship as evidence that humans were nudged toward agriculture, as if someone stocked the module with starter crops and said, "Let's see how long it takes them." Mainstream historians stick to the narrative of trial, error, and gradual domestication. Still, you can't shake the image of Earth as a carefully curated buffet. Then there's rice, growing easily in flooded paddies across Asia, feeding billions. Corn, standing tall across the Americas, each kernel like a bead of sunlight. And potatoes, humble, earthy, able to sustain entire populations in harsh climates. These crops didn't just feed humans, they expanded empires, built economies, powered wars. Placement isn't abstract when it's sitting on your dinner plate. Your stomach growls again, and you think about fruit. Apples that crunch sweetly, bananas practically prepackaged in their own biodegradable wrappers, grapes bursting with sugar and hydration. You laugh softly because bananas especially feel like a cosmic joke. Peelable, sweet, easy to digest. If fruit is nature's candy, then bananas are clearly the universe's vending machine. You recall a quirky tidbit. In ancient Egypt, dates were so revered they were buried with the dead, packed as snacks for the afterlife. Imagine that. Placement so suspiciously convenient that people assume the food must follow them beyond death. Historians still argue whether burial offerings were literal nutrition for the spirit or symbolic gestures. Either way, it reveals how deeply humans trusted Earth's pantry. You wander further, spotting animals grazing in the distance. Domesticated species, cows, goats, sheep, chickens, have another suspiciously neat relationship with humans. They provide milk, eggs, meat, leather, wool, and they stick close, evolving alongside their caretakers. Dogs even adjusted their digestive systems to tolerate starch when they joined human settlements. That's more than survival, it's partnership, almost like placement intended the two species to collaborate. You sit on a log, chin in hand, thinking about how milk itself is a bizarre detail. No other species routinely drinks the milk of another, yet here you are, sipping cappuccinos and eating cheese boards. And while most mammals lose the ability to digest lactose after infancy, many human populations develop tolerance through mutations. Fringe theorists call this the dairy patch, an upgrade rolled out mid-placement. Historians still argue whether it was sheer chance or something more deliberate. The fireflies return, blinking like lanterns, and you muse on spices. Think about how plants like cinnamon, pepper, and basil not only flavour food, but contain antimicrobial properties. Ancient cultures didn't know the chemistry, but they sprinkled spices liberally, protecting meals from spoilage while delighting their tongues. Placement here feels almost generous, like a cosmic host saying, yes, survival, but let's make it tasty. And then there's chocolate, cacao beans, bitter in raw form, transformed by human ingenuity into something that can soothe heartbreak, fuel revolutions, or simply bribe a child into silence. The Mayans considered cacao sacred, the drink of the gods. Historians still argue whether their rituals around chocolate were purely symbolic or tied to altered states of consciousness. Either way, it proves Earth's pantry wasn't stocked with bland fuel. It was stocked with luxuries. Placement came with dessert. Your mouth waters at the thought of honey, golden nectar created by bees, a food that never spoils, never rots, lasting thousands of years if sealed. Archaeologists have found pots of honey in Egyptian tombs still edible after millennia. That's not just food, it's a survival cheat code. You laugh softly, whispering, "Thanks, bees," because placement doesn't just sustain, it surprises. As the night deepens, you recall how cultures often turned food into sacred symbols. Bread and wine in Christian communion, rice scattered at weddings, salt offered as peace. Historians still argue whether these rituals were pragmatic acknowledgements of survival essentials or mystical recognition of something greater. Either way, food became more than calories. It became confirmation that Earth's pantry was a gift, not an accident. You sigh and lie back on the log, staring up at stars hidden by tree branches. Imagine if placement had been stingy. No fruit sweet enough to enjoy, no spices fragrant enough to savour, no chocolate melting on the tongue. Survival would have been possible, sure, but bleak. Instead, you got variety, flavour, comfort. A suspiciously curated menu, and you can't help but think, food fits too well. The enzymes in your saliva line up with the starch in bread. Your teeth are shaped for both tearing and grinding. Your digestive tract balances efficiency with tolerance. The match is too snug, too cooperative. Whether by luck or design, placement made sure you'd never stop eating, and never stop wondering who set the table first. The thought of food still lingers pleasantly in your imagination, grapes bursting on your tongue, bread warm from an ancient oven. But eventually your mind pulls downward, literally. You shift your weight on the ground and feel it. The tug, the constant anchor that never lets go. Gravity. It's so normal, so ever-present, that you barely think about it. And yet, when you pause long enough, you realise this invisible force might be the biggest clue of all. Because placement isn't just about air and water and bananas, it's also about weight, about how the planet grips you like a mother's hand. You stand slowly, feeling the pull in your calves, your knees, your spine. On Earth, gravity is just strong enough to keep your body firmly grounded, but not so overwhelming that you collapse under your own mass. Perfectly balanced. Just right yet again. Historians still argue whether Isaac Newton's famous apple story was literal or mythologized, but regardless, his formulation of gravity made people realize that this gentle tug shapes everything, from the fall of fruit to the motion of planets. And yet, you think, if you had been placed here, the force couldn't be anything but perfect. Consider this. If Earth were significantly larger, its gravity would increase. Your bones would strain, your muscles would scream, your lungs would labour harder. Walking might feel like dragging a boulder everywhere you go. Forget leaping joyfully, you'd barely shuffle. If Earth were smaller, its gravity would weaken. You'd bounce like an astronaut, fragile bones thinning with each generation until bodies broke like chalk. Instead, here you are, 1G, the Goldilocks of gravitational pulls. You can climb, dance, lie flat, all without falling apart. Coincidence? Maybe. But it feels suspiciously curated. You tilt your head back, looking at the sky, and imagine life on Mars. The weaker gravity there makes astronauts lose bone density after only months. Their muscles atrophy, their hearts weaken. The human body isn't designed for that kind of placement, and on Jupiter, forget it. You'd be flattened before you even had time to complain. Earth's gravity doesn't just feel normal, it feels like calibration. like someone slid the dial until it hit comfortably survivable. You start walking again, noticing how every step relies on this force. Your heel hits the ground, your muscles contract, your balance holds. Without gravity, even standing would be impossible. You'd float away, legs kicking uselessly. Yet gravity is not so severe that you're chained immobile. It's generous but not indulgent, demanding but not tyrannical. You laugh under your breath. It's like Earth's gravity went to finishing school. A quirky tidbit slips into your memory. Medieval scholars once believed heavier objects fell faster than lighter ones, until Galileo supposedly dropped spheres from the Leaning Tower of Pisa to prove otherwise. Historians still argue whether he really performed that experiment or whether it's a later embellishment, but the point remains, humans have always been fascinated by the tug beneath their feet, always aware that this unseen leash might hold more secrets than it reveals. As twilight deepens, you notice your own body complaining a little. Knees stiff, lower back aching. Gravity is perfect for survival, yes, but it also wears you down. Joints grind, spines compress, skin sags. You smirk at the irony. The same force that lets you dance also makes you creak when you get out of bed. Placement isn't flawless. It comes with maintenance costs. The way a rental car looks shiny on day one but develops mysterious rattles after a while. You settle onto a boulder and think about how gravity also shapes your world beyond the body. Oceans bulge under the moon's pull, tides rising and falling like planetary breathing. Rivers carve valleys, mountains slowly collapse, atmospheres cling instead of leaking into space. Without gravity's firm hand, Earth would be a barren ball of dust. No rivers, no trees, no air. Placement without gravity wouldn't just be uncomfortable, it would be impossible. Yet gravity also traps you. For all your dreams of exploring the stars, you remain tethered to this planet. Rockets burn unimaginable amounts of fuel just to escape the leash for a little while. Maybe that's part of the test. Placement wasn't meant to make you too mobile, too careless. The leash keeps you humble. You laugh softly, imagining a cosmic landlord saying, "Sure, you can leave the apartment, but only if you can climb through the window carrying your own oxygen supply." The forest grows darker, stars pricking overhead, and you remember how Einstein redefined gravity not as a force but as the curvature of space-time itself. Objects follow curves in the fabric of reality, like marbles rolling across a stretched sheet. Placement, then, isn't just about Earth's size or mass, it's about the very geometry of the universe. You pause, thinking, if space-time itself is curved just right to allow stable orbits, then the stage wasn't just set. It was sculpted. Historians still argue whether ancient myths describing the world as a net, or woven threads of fate, were poetic coincidences or distant intuitions of this geometry. A breeze stirs, and you grin at the odd ways humans have always tested gravity, from Icarus mythically tumbling after flying too close to the sun, to daredevils leaping from cliffs with parachutes, to astronauts bouncing on the moon like toddlers on trampolines. You can't help but think, maybe you test gravity because you sense it's too perfect, too neat. You poke it, prod it, trying to reveal the strings behind the stage, and yet, sometimes, it feels too heavy. You recall the old complaint of poets and philosophers, life weighs us down. The Greek Titan Atlas was punished to hold the heavens on his shoulders, a myth that feels like metaphor for every human carrying invisible burdens. Placement might be generous, but it's not light. You're always reminded of your anchor, always reminded you belong here, whether you want to or not. The stars glitter brighter now, and you stretch out on the ground, feeling the full press of 1G against your back. It's both cradle and cage, comfort and confinement. Without it, you'd never have learned to walk. With it, you may never truly leave. And lying there, your body pulled softly but firmly against the earth, you can't shake the feeling that the leash itself might be the biggest breadcrumb of all. The weight of gravity still presses gently against your body as you lie back on the ground, but another presence soon pulls your gaze upward. The moon has risen, pale and watchful, hanging in the sky with an authority that feels almost unnatural. Not too big, not too small, but just the right size to dominate the night. It isn't a background prop, it's a co-star. And the more you think about it, the more suspicious it seems. If Earth is a habitat module, then the moon feels like its built-in caretaker, a roommate who tidies up when you're not paying attention. You let your eyes follow the silvery glow. The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, but also 400 times closer, which makes them appear the same size in the sky. That cosmic coincidence creates solar eclipses, those breathtaking moments when the moon slides perfectly in front of the sun, blotting it out like a precision tool. Out of countless planetary systems, you happen to live on the one where this geometry works out perfectly. Historians still argue whether ancient records of eclipses, etched into Babylonian tablets or recorded by Chinese astronomers, were purely observational or imbued with a suspicion of deliberate design. You whisper to yourself, "What are the odds?" And the night doesn't answer. The moon's job isn't just spectacle, though. Its gravitational pull tugs at Earth's oceans, creating tides that rise and fall with hypnotic rhythm. Without tides, life might never have crawled from the sea. Tidal pools created miniature laboratories for evolution, nurturing the transition from water to land. You imagine tiny fish-like creatures stranded in shallow pools, learning to gulp air, each one nudged along by the moon's gentle hand. Placement begins to look less like random luck and more like teamwork. You rise to your feet and start walking slowly, the moon following you like an over-attentive lamp. You think about how the moon stabilizes Earth's tilt, keeping it from wobbling too wildly. Without it, seasons would swing chaotically, climate veering from frozen apocalypse to scorching desert. Instead, the tilt holds steady at that Goldilocks angle of 23.5 degrees. Crops grow, migrations follow predictable paths, calendars form. The moon, silent and reliable, keeps the module stable. Fringe thinkers love to say this is no coincidence. The moon was placed deliberately to serve as Earth's gyroscope. Mainstream astronomers shrug and call it an outcome of cosmic chance. Still, as you feel the cool glow on your skin, it's hard not to sense purpose. A quirky fact flits into your memory. The moon is slowly drifting away, about 4 centimeters each year. Billions of years from now, it will no longer perfectly eclipse the sun. These dazzling alignments you enjoy are temporary. It feels like a feature designed for now, for you, as though the module came with a limited time performance. Enjoy the show while it lasts, the universe seems to whisper. Historians still argue whether ancient obsessions with lunar cycles, seen in cave markings or early calendars, reflected practical survival needs or a deeper intuition that the moon was more than decoration. You pause at a clearing where the light spills across the grass in silver ribbons. You think about how entire cultures have woven their lives around this orb. The Islamic calendar still follows lunar cycles. The Chinese Mid-Autumn Festival celebrates its fullness. Native American tribes named each month by the moon: Harvest Moon, Wolf Moon, Strawberry Moon. To them, the moon wasn't accessory. It was clock, companion, storyteller. Placement seems less random when you realize how seamlessly the satellites synchronized with human life. And then there are the stranger tidbits. The moon is oddly large compared to Earth, much larger than most moons relative to their planets. It also orbits at just the right distance to create balanced tides, not destructive floods. Its face is locked toward Earth, always showing the same side as though posed deliberately for inspection. Fringe theories have even claimed the moon is hollow, a constructed object rather than a natural satellite. Mainstream science scoffs, pointing to seismic data and rock samples. Yet the suspicion lingers in the fringe corners of thought. The moon doesn't just look placed, it acts placed. You laugh softly, remembering how conspiracy enthusiasts love to call the moon the control tower. They point out that many ancient monuments, from Stonehenge to the pyramids, align not just with the sun but also with the moon. Was it coincidence? Or a deliberate synchronization, as though architects were leaving messages about their landlord in the sky? Historians still argue whether those alignments were religious symbolism or evidence of astronomical obsession. Either way, the stone whispers and the silver glow seem to be in conversation across time. You sit on a fallen log, moonlight brushing your face, and recall one of the most iconic moments in human history, 1969, when Apollo 11 landed on the lunar surface. Neil Armstrong's words crackled across the radio. "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Billions watched, hearts thumping as humans finally reached their luminous companion. And what did they find? Dust, rocks, silence. Placement had left the moon strangely barren, as though it were meant to be observed, not inhabited. Perhaps the moon's job wasn't to house you, but to guard you, to balance you, to hold your gaze upward until you dreamed bigger. A breeze stirs the trees, and you grin at the poetic irony. Lovers have always gazed at the moon. Poets have always written to it. Werewolves have always howled at it in stories. It's not just an object, it's a character. Placement feels theatrical when you realise Earth's module comes with a built-in supporting actor, one who never misses its cue. You lie back on the grass again, the moon hovering above, and let its light soak into your thoughts. Too big to be random, too functional to be dismissed, too steady to be ignored. If Earth is the stage, then the moon is the stagehand, silent but essential, pulling ropes behind the curtain to keep the show running. And as you close your eyes, lulled by its glow, you can't help but think, maybe the oddest job of the moon is simply this, to remind you every single night that placement leaves its fingerprints in the sky. The moon keeps its silent watch above you, silver light pressing gently across your skin. But as you linger under its glow, another thought creeps in, a mischievous, unnerving whisper. What if none of this is real? What if Earth, with all its perfect balances, isn't a stage set in the material sense at all, but rather a simulation, a coded world running inside some vast invisible machine? You chuckle at the absurdity, but the idea is hard to shake. Placement, after all, doesn't always require bricks and mortar. It might require lines of code. You stretch your arms across the grass and let the question settle. Reality feels solid. The ground beneath you is cool, the air fragrant with leaves and soil. But that's exactly the trick, isn't it? A good simulation wouldn't advertise its artificiality. It would bury you in sensations so convincing that you'd stop asking questions. Historians still argue whether Plato's allegory of the cave, shadows flickering on the wall mistaken for reality, was philosophy, metaphor, or an ancient glitch theory in disguise. You rise and start walking again, every crunch of gravel beneath your feet like punctuation marks in the thought. Coincidences flash across your memory, the kind that feel less like chance and more like coding quirks. Déjà vu, for instance, that uncanny sense that you've lived this moment before. Your brain insists it's a misfire of memory. But part of you suspects it's a skipped frame, a scene reloaded, the simulation stuttering for just a second. You pass under the branches of a tall oak, its leaves trembling in the breeze. Look closely and patterns repeat endlessly. Veins in the leaves mirror rivers on a map. Branches mimic lightning bolts. Spiral seeds echo galaxies. The fractal repetition is beautiful, but also suspicious. Why does the same math show up everywhere, from shells to hurricanes to blood vessels? Fringe thinkers call it evidence of coding shortcuts, like programmers reusing assets to save time. Mainstream science shrugs and calls it physics. Historians still argue whether myths of cosmic webs or woven fates were metaphors for this patterning, or glimpses of something deeper. You pause at a clearing and look up at the stars. They seem random, but your ancestors found constellations, repeating shapes, cosmic Easter eggs. And then there are the fine-tuned constants, the speed of light, the strength of gravity, the charge of the electron. Each one precisely what it must be for life to exist. Change them even slightly, and no atoms, no stars, no Earth. Some call this divine placement, others call it luck. But in the simulation theory, it's simply parameter settings. Someone typed the right numbers into the cosmic command line. A memory stirs of a quirky detail. The mathematician John von Neumann once mused about self-replicating automata, machines capable of reproducing themselves. DNA, you realise, is exactly that. Life is an algorithm that copies itself. If this is a simulation, DNA is both the code and the coder, running instructions across billions of iterations. Fringe interpreters take it further, suggesting we ourselves might be NPCs, non-player characters, following scripts with only the illusion of free will. You laugh nervously, whispering, "If I'm an NPC, I'd like to request better dialogue." You find a fallen branch and lean on it like a staff, wandering through the clearing as the thought gnaws deeper. Have you ever noticed how numbers keep sneaking into daily life? The Fibonacci sequence, golden ratios, pi stretching infinitely yet appearing in the curve of seashells and the spirals of galaxies. It feels like the developers couldn't resist showing off, leaving their signatures everywhere. Historians still argue whether ancient fascination with sacred geometry was pure mysticism or a faint recognition of these recurring codes. A fox darts across your path, pauses, and vanishes into the undergrowth. You grin. Wildlife feels unscripted, spontaneous. But then you recall how ecosystems self-balance, how predator and prey populations oscillate like waveforms, equations disguised as biology. Sometimes it feels less like wild nature and more like physics engines running in the background, invisible but precise. If Earth is a simulation, then foxes are beautifully rendered assets, coded with enough unpredictability to trick you into believing in randomness. You lower yourself onto a stump and consider the strangest glitch of all, human consciousness. Out of meat and electricity somehow arises awareness, the ability to say, I exist. Philosophers have wrestled with this forever. Descartes declared, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. But what if thought itself is part of the trick? If the simulation were advanced enough, wouldn't it include characters capable of suspecting they're simulated? Historians still argue whether mystic traditions that describe reality as illusion or dream were poetic metaphors or early glitch theories. The wind shifts suddenly, stronger than before, rattling branches and tossing your hair. For a fleeting second, you imagine the weather itself recalibrating, a system update mid-run. You laugh at the thought, but glitches often appear in subtle ways. Uncanny coincidences, people you meet twice in different cities, dreams that echo waking life too closely, random numbers that don't feel random. Fringe thinkers point to these oddities as tells, cracks in the code. Mainstream psychologists prefer explanations involving probability, memory bias, and the brain's love for patterns. But sitting there in the moonlit clearing, you admit, sometimes the script feels too neat. You glance upward again, and for a moment the stars blur, as though the sky itself lags. You blink, and the world resets crisp and clear. Probably tired eyes, or maybe, just maybe, a rendering glitch. A reminder that this module isn't infinite, only as detailed as it needs to be. You chuckle, recalling how video game designers save processing power by rendering only what the player sees. Could Earth be the same? A world loaded around you, real only as long as you look at it? You push yourself up and walk slowly, savouring the crunch of leaves. Even if it is a simulation, you think it's a good one. The taste of fruit, the warmth of sunlight, the softness of moss beneath your palms. If placement means being coded, then at least it's a simulation built with generosity. The bugs and glitches, déjà vu, coincidences, repeating patterns, don't ruin it. They make it more interesting, more mysterious. Finally, Baruch, you stop in a wide meadow bathed in moonlight. The night is still, the air cool, the stars sharp. Real, simulated, placed, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here, breathing, wondering, alive inside a puzzle box you may never fully solve. And as you lie back in the grass once again, smiling faintly at the possibility that reality itself is a clever piece of code, you whisper to the sky, if this is a simulation, well played. The idea of glitches lingers in your mind like static on a radio, but soon your thoughts drift further, towards something stranger. If Earth is a module, maybe it isn't just running on autopilot. Maybe it's hosted, watched, maintained. You roll the word around in your head, host. It feels unsettling, like waking up in a terrarium and realizing the glass walls aren't just for protection but for observation. What if humanity isn't the landlord here, but the pet? You shift uneasily on the grass and imagine Earth as an enormous enclosure. Perfectly stocked food, balanced climates, fresh water, even moonlight as a nightlight. Every detail makes sense if the planet was built not for randomness but for hosting. The question that prickles your skin is, hosted by whom? The thought isn't new. Ancient myths already hinted at caretakers who placed humans here deliberately. But now you imagine them not as gods in robes, but as something more clinical. Cosmic zookeepers. Perhaps they check in occasionally, note the progress of their human tenants, then retreat to their observation deck. Fringe thinkers call this the zoo hypothesis, the idea that extraterrestrials keep Earth under quarantine to observe natural development. Mainstream scientists tend to chuckle politely, but even some astrophysicists admit it can't be disproven. Historians still argue whether stories of sky people in Native American and Aboriginal traditions were spiritual metaphors or faded memories of encounters with caretakers. You stand and wander through the meadow, the moon still following like a curious eye. The air feels heavier now, as though charged with surveillance. You picture enormous, unseen beings peering down through lenses or screens, cataloguing your behaviour the way biologists track migrating birds. It sounds paranoid, but then again, humans do the same. You build nature preserves, install cameras, tag animals with GPS trackers. Why wouldn't something more advanced do the same with you? A quirky tidbit surfaces. In the 1970s, the Arecibo Observatory sent a radio message toward the stars, a binary code describing humanity, our numbers, DNA structure, and even a stick figure drawing. It was like slipping a note through the glass of your terrarium. Hello, we're in here. Decades later, fringe enthusiasts claimed a crop circle in England was the reply, featuring a humanoid figure and altered DNA patterns. Mainstream scientists dismissed it as a hoax. Still, the thought of messaging your hosts and maybe hearing back sends a ripple down your spine. You pause beside a tree, running your fingers along its bark. If the earth is a terrarium, then forests are the decoration. Logs, leaves, climbing structures placed not only for function but for aesthetic. The streams are water bowls, the mountains enrichment objects, the deserts perhaps the difficult zones designed to challenge. Even predators fit into this logic. In zoos, caretakers sometimes introduce stressors, obstacles, puzzles, to keep animals sharp. Maybe Earth's hardships are the same, enrichment in the enclosure. You laugh softly, thinking about how humans themselves build zoos and aquariums. Dolphins leap for fish in pools, apes solve puzzles for treats, pandas lounge on bamboo. You marvel at how easily roles could be reversed. What if, in some higher zoo, you are the panda? Cute, intelligent, endlessly observed. The thought is both humbling and terrifying. The meadow hums with crickets, and you recall how UFO sightings spike in waves throughout history. Lights darting across skies, discs hovering silently, abductions whispered about in hushed tones. Mainstream explanations range from weather phenomena to hallucinations to aircraft misidentified. But fringe interpreters insist these are routine check-ins, caretakers poking their heads into the enclosure to see how the pets are doing. Historians still argue whether medieval drawings of flaming shields in the sky or the airships reported in the 19th century were genuine sightings or cultural projections. Either way, the echoes are eerie. You lie back in the grass again, the moonlight pooling across your chest, and think about how neatly the host idea fits. If placement happened, if Earth was stocked and balanced and tuned, then someone had to set it all up. Maybe they designed the DNA, tweaked the language, stocked the pantry, calibrated the gravity, and maybe they're still watching, silently pleased or mildly disappointed, like keepers checking on an exhibit during their nightly rounds. You grin despite yourself, imagining the cosmic zookeeper holding a clipboard. Subjects still bickering about politics. Subject 4827 spent 2 hours staring at the sky again. Note, install more mysteries. It feels ridiculous, but then you remember how scientists study ants, tracking them without the ants ever suspecting. Maybe you're the ant, oblivious but certain of your own autonomy. A breeze ripples through the meadow, and you think of one more unsettling angle. What if the hosts aren't benevolent? Maybe you're livestock, not pets. Maybe food itself. Fringe theories spin wild tales of humans as resources, energy, emotion, even soul stuff harvested by unseen caretakers. Mainstream science laughs at such paranoia. Still, when you recall myths of gods demanding sacrifice, feasting on smoke and blood, you wonder if those were not metaphors but memories of extraction. Historians still argue whether ritual sacrifice was psychological theatre or something that truly felt like feeding. You shake your head, pushing away the darker version, preferring the gentler one. Maybe the hosts are curious, not cruel. Maybe they want to see how far you'll get, what stories you'll tell, whether you'll ever figure out you're being watched. You roll onto your side, smiling faintly, and whisper, "Well, if you're listening, thanks for the bananas." The crickets sing louder now, a chorus under the moon's eye. You close your eyes, drifting towards sleep. The thought of hosts circling you like soft shadows, and whether they're real or not doesn't matter tonight. The suspicion is enough. The breadcrumbs all point to the same haunting possibility. You are not alone in this enclosure. Someone, or something, holds the keys. The thought of alien hosts lingers like a shadow at the edge of your vision, but soon another layer rises up to meet it, one that humanity has been weaving for millennia: religion. If Earth is a terrarium, if placement really happened, then perhaps the oldest and loudest whispers of that truth live not in science or myth alone, but in the prayers, scriptures, and rituals that people have carried across centuries. Faith traditions are, in their own way, placement theories, wrapped not in equations or UFO sightings, but in devotion. You sit upright in the meadow, the moon still casting its watchful glow, and recall the creation stories you've already walked through. Gods moulding humans from clay, divine sparks breathed into dust, cosmic giants sacrificed into worlds. But religions did more than tell origin tales. They framed humanity's very presence here as deliberate. Christianity, for instance, places humanity in a garden, intentionally crafted by God, not stumbled upon by accident. Eden wasn't random. It was curated, cultivated, stocked with food and rivers, with only one rule posted like a landlord's note: don't touch that tree. Historians still argue whether Eden was a mythological metaphor or an echo of some real memory. Either way, the underlying idea was unmistakable. You were placed deliberately, lovingly, or sternly by a caretaker. You stand and walk slowly toward a grove of trees, their branches brushing the sky like cathedral arches. In Islam, the Quran speaks of humans as khalifa, stewards placed on earth with responsibility to tend it. Placement isn't just implied, it's declared. God installs humanity as caretakers, a role with both privilege and consequence. This is no random drop-off. It's an assignment, a posting. Fringe interpreters even suggest this language reflects the sensation of being temporarily stationed here, like soldiers in a forward base. Mainstream theology sees it as moral instruction. Historians still argue whether the strong emphasis on stewardship grew out of ecological necessity or deeper cosmic intuition. As the night deepens, your mind drifts further east toward Hindu traditions. Here, the universe is cyclical, endlessly created and destroyed in vast cosmic rhythms. Humans emerge from divine intention, woven into the eternal dance of Brahman, the Absolute. Placement here isn't one time, it's perpetual, as though souls are cycled through modules repeatedly, trying on different forms and bodies until they finally transcend. You think of reincarnation as cosmic recycling, the enclosure reused until the lesson is learned. The hosts in this version aren't aliens, they're gods endlessly running simulations of existence. A breeze rustles the leaves, and you think of Buddhism. Life here is framed not as permanent belonging, but as impermanence, illusion, maya. The world feels real, but enlightenment reveals it as a constructed experience, a temporary placement on the way to liberation. You can't help but grin. The Buddhists were essentially saying simulation theory 2,500 years before computers existed. Historians still argue whether the Buddha's teachings were purely psychological insights or cosmological descriptions. Either way, they echo the suspicion that the world is a designed classroom, not the final home. You pause at the grove's edge, hands brushing bark, and recall Judaism. In its traditions, humanity is repeatedly described as chosen, set apart, placed under covenant. Placement here isn't just physical, it's contractual, a deal between host and tenant. You stay, you thrive, but you follow the rules. You can almost hear the cosmic landlord saying, yes, you can live here, but don't break the lease. Further across the world, you think of indigenous spiritualities. The Lakota speak of being connected to all living things, woven into a deliberate web. The Maori describe humans as the younger siblings of nature, placed within a family of earth, sky, sea, and spirit. Placement here feels less like control and more like kinship. You're not dumped into a module but woven into it. Fringe enthusiasts sometimes read these traditions as coded memory of alien caretakers. Mainstream interpreters see them as sophisticated ecological philosophies. Historians still argue whether their cosmologies were pragmatic survival systems or reflections of deeper truths. You sink down at the base of a tree, the ground cool beneath you, and let the swirl of traditions wash over your mind. So many religions, so many stories, yet most converge on one idea. You didn't just appear, You were put here for a reason, by someone or something larger. Sometimes benevolent, sometimes terrifying, sometimes mysterious. Placement, but with intent. A quirky fact drifts into your thoughts. Medieval theologians debated how many angels could dance on the head of a pin. Ridiculous at first glance, but at heart, it was about placement. How many spiritual beings could fit into physical space? Even in their abstractions, people kept circling back to the suspicion that existence was carefully arranged, measured, structured. You chuckle, imagining angels as cosmic landlords, checking meters and adjusting thermostats. Maybe divine beings are less harp and halo, more clipboard and checklist. Tenant 372 has been praying consistently. Tenant 481 broke the covenant again. It's absurd, but you can't help noticing how religions often frame God, or gods, as deeply interested in human behaviour, as if they were monitoring subjects in a carefully staged habitat. The crickets sing louder, and you realise how many religious rituals reinforce this placement idea. Baptism, for instance, recreates birth into a divine placement. Pilgrimage reenacts journeys of origin. Prayer itself is communication, not with neighbours but with hosts. Historians still argue whether ritual is purely social glue or evidence of humans instinctively trying to talk to whoever placed them here. You lean your head back against the tree and think of fringe tidbits, like Erich von Däniken's infamous claim that biblical descriptions of angels might actually be misinterpreted astronauts, caretakers visiting the terrarium in shimmering suits. Mainstream theologians scoff at such theories, but you admit it's hard not to squint at Ezekiel's vision of wheels within wheels, or fiery chariots rising into the sky. Were those metaphors, or memories of a host checking in? The wind softens, carrying a faint hush through the grove, and you feel the weight of religious placement. It's heavy but also comforting. If faith traditions are right, then you're not alone, not accidental, not lost. You're placed with purpose, with meaning, with someone watching. That knowledge can terrify or soothe depending on the night. Tonight, under the moon's glow, it feels soothing, like being tucked under a blanket by hands unseen. You close your eyes, letting the murmur of crickets and rustling leaves blend with the imagined whisper of prayer. If you were placed here, perhaps faith was the note slipped under your door, a reminder that the host is still nearby, listening, waiting. And whether you call that host God, gods, spirits, or caretakers, the message is the same. You are not random, you are placed. You sit quietly at the base of the tree, the religious echoes still warm in your mind, but you know what comes next. Not everyone buys into placement, divine or alien. There's a whole chorus of voices ready to roll their eyes at the idea, armed not with prayer beads or myths but with microscopes and equations. Science, with its relentless pushback, is always at the ready to tug you back down to earth, literally and metaphorically. You rise slowly and begin walking again, leaves crunching underfoot. The forest feels like a classroom, and you imagine the scientists waiting at the front with chalkboards filled with formulas. To them, Earth doesn't feel suspiciously tuned. It feels inevitable once you grasp the mechanics. The Goldilocks zone, just physics, DNA, a product of billions of years of trial and error, language, an emergent property of clever primates needing to cooperate. Every placement claim, they argue, can be dismantled, explained and reassembled without invoking hidden caretakers. Take the fine-tuned conditions of Earth. The scientific pushback is immediate. You only think they're miraculous because you're here to notice them. That's the anthropic principle again. Life exists because conditions allowed it, not the other way around. If conditions weren't right, you simply wouldn't be here to complain about it. Historians still argue whether this principle is profound or just philosophical sleight of hand. But to scientists, it's the trump card against placement. You pass under low branches, their shadows flickering across your face, and think about evolution. Darwin's revolution wasn't just about finches or fossils, it was about demolishing the need for placement altogether. Natural selection explains the fit between organisms and their environment without a designer. Random mutations sifted by survival pressures produce creatures perfectly suited to their niches. Eyes didn't need to be placed, they evolved from simple light-sensitive cells. Bananas aren't vending machine snacks, they're cultivated fruits bred by humans. The match between you and your world isn't proof of curation, they insist. It's proof of adaptation. You pause near a fallen log, recalling a quirky fact. Penguins once had ancestors that flew, but over time wings became flippers, not placed but shaped by survival. The same story repeats everywhere. Whales from land-dwelling mammals, horses with toes that vanished into hooves. Evolution, scientists argue, explains not only success but failure, extinction, and dead ends. Fringe placement theories, they complain, ignore the messiness. Historians still argue whether early resistance to Darwin came from genuine scientific skepticism or cultural discomfort at losing the safety of being placed. And then there's language. Linguists with lab coats and datasets argue it isn't a cosmic plug-in, but a product of social necessity. Cooperation required communication, so vocal cords and brains adapted in tandem. The universals of grammar. Evidence not of design, but of shared neural wiring shaped by common ancestry. No need for divine subtitles, just survival efficiency. You keep walking, crunching leaves, and remember how scientists point to flaws in human design as proof against placement. The human spine, prone to back pain, poorly adapted for upright walking. The appendix, a seemingly useless leftover that occasionally tries to kill you. The birth canal, narrow enough to make childbirth dangerous. If you were placed, they ask, why so many bugs in the system? The pushback is sharp and you can almost hear the sarcasm dripping. If Earth was a module, it was built by interns. A cool wind stirs and you smile faintly, acknowledging the sting of the critique. Scientists don't just dismiss placement, they relish dismantling it. The zoo hypothesis? Where's the evidence? The simulation theory? Clever but untestable. The religious placement? Faith, not data. For every whispered breadcrumb, science demands receipts. Historians still argue whether this skepticism is a product of genuine enlightenment or just another kind of dogma. After all, rejecting placement doesn't erase mystery. It just repackages it in equations. You settle on a mossy rock and stare up at the stars. Astronomy too offers pushback. The universe isn't cozy and curated, it's violent, vast, indifferent. Supernovas tear stars apart, black holes swallow light, gamma-ray bursts could sterilize entire planets. Earth is a rare, safe bubble in a cosmos that seems anything but gentle. Placement, scientists argue, would imply generosity. Reality, they say, is brutal. And yet, even science stumbles into contradictions. Quantum mechanics, with its probabilities and uncertainties, still puzzles physicists. Why does reality flicker between particle and wave depending on whether you're watching? Some scientists admit it feels theatrical, as though reality itself cares about observation. Fringe voices grin and whisper, placement. Mainstream physicists sigh and mutter, we'll figure it out eventually. Historians still argue whether mystics and philosophers had already intuited this strangeness centuries ago. You lean back, letting the rock cool your spine, and consider the cultural pushback too. Placement theories, especially alien ones, are often dismissed as fringe or conspiratorial, relegated to late-night television and paperbacks. Religion is tolerated, science respected. But what if we were placed here? Remains the awkward cousin no one invites to dinner. The pushback isn't just about data, it's about reputation. To ask is to risk ridicule. But you notice something sly beneath the pushback. Fascination. Scientists, even while debunking, can't stop circling back to the very mysteries that make placement theories tempting. Why is DNA so coded? Why does the moon fit so perfectly? Why do constants align so neatly? They explain yes, but they also marvel. The pushback may be rational, but it can't fully erase the itch. You chuckle softly, rising from the rock, because you realise pushback itself is part of the placement puzzle. Every theory needs tension. Every classroom needs skeptics. Without science, placement would collapse into wishful thinking. Without placement, science might collapse into cold equations with no wonder. Perhaps both exist because both are needed. The skeptical voice and the suspicious whisper. You walk deeper into the night, the forest quiet except for your own breath. Scientific pushback may not offer the comfort of being placed, but it grounds you, reminds you of fragility, and forces you to keep asking questions. And maybe that's its hidden gift. Because even when science says no, your mind still leans toward, but what if? And in that leaning, the mystery remains alive. You keep walking beneath the canopy, the scientific pushback still echoing like chalk squeaks on a blackboard, but a new thought begins to drift in. Quiet, nagging, slippery. If you really were placed here, why don't you remember it? Shouldn't there be some trace? Some first day orientation pamphlet tucked into your subconscious? Instead, your memories only stretch back to early childhood, and before that, a blur. The mystery deepens not in the evidence of placement, but in the absence of memory. You stop and crouch near a patch of moss, letting the questions seep into you like groundwater. It's strange, isn't it? For all the grandeur of Earth, for all the monuments and myths and DNA spirals, you have no recollection of arriving. You woke into the world as a screaming infant, with no knowledge of anything beyond hunger and comfort. If placement happened, it was erased from you, or maybe deliberately hidden. Historians still argue whether humanity's obsession with origin myths is a symptom of this blank spot, an unconscious need to fill in what memory can't. Sumerians inventing sky beings, Greeks sculpting clay humans, Christians setting a garden stage. Maybe those stories weren't pure invention. Maybe they were attempts to patch the memory gap with narrative duct tape. You rise again and wander down the trail, considering how ordinary memory works. Neuroscience tells you the hippocampus consolidates experiences, yet memories remain malleable, fragile. A smell, a song, a dream can distort them. Entire chunks of your life may vanish, overwritten by time. If daily memories fade so easily, how could you expect to remember something as monumental as being placed here, especially if that moment happened thousands or millions of years ago? But then the more unsettling thought creeps in. What if the forgetting isn't natural? What if it was designed? If you were placed into a habitat module, maybe one of the first steps was wiping your memory clean. After all, you don't want the lab rats realizing they're in a maze. You want them to behave as if it's home. Fringe thinkers sometimes call this the veil of forgetting, a deliberate fog placed over consciousness. Mainstream psychologists roll their eyes and say humans are just bad record keepers, but sitting here in the forest, you can't help but wonder if your own blank childhood memories are part of a larger amnesia. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. Some mystics claim children are closer to remembering. Their strange sayings and imaginary friends hints of lives before birth. Parents often laugh them off. Kids say weird things. But what if those odd whispers are fragments of memory leaking through before the veil thickens? Historians still argue whether folklore about children's wisdom comes from superstition or genuine recognition that kids see differently. You reach a clearing where moonlight spills across the ground like spilled milk. You lie back, arms spread, and let the thought deepen. Dreams complicate everything, don't they? Night after night, your brain spins scenarios, some surreal, some achingly familiar. You wake with flashes of places you've never been, people you've never met. Are these simply random firings of neurons, or are they fragments of suppressed memory sneaking through, tiny breaches in the forgetting system? Science, of course, insists dreams are byproducts, emotional processing, memory consolidation, leftover brain chatter. But fringe voices argue otherwise. They claim dreams are windows, brief moments when your mind glimpses elsewhere. Perhaps even your original home, the place you were before being placed here. Historians still argue whether ancient traditions of dream interpretation, from Babylon to Greece, were early psychology or something more mystical. You smirk, recalling the absurdity of déjà vu, that eerie conviction that you've stood in this exact spot, seen this exact scene, lived this exact moment before. Mainstream science shrugs, a glitch of memory, brain circuits misfiring. But what if déjà vu is exactly what it feels like? A flash of memory from before the veil. A sudden glimpse of your placement being overwritten, but not perfectly. Like a scratch in the CD, repeating a fragment of the song. A breeze ripples through the clearing, and you think about reincarnation stories. How so many cultures insist that memories survive death, carried into new lives. Children who recall past names, villages, even violent deaths. Mainstream science dismisses most of these as hoaxes or confabulations, yet the stories keep appearing. If placement is real, maybe reincarnation is the recycling of modules, the resetting of avatars, each time with memory wiped so the lesson feels fresh. You sit up again, pulling your knees to your chest. It's oddly cruel, isn't it? To live in a world so suspiciously tuned, surrounded by breadcrumbs of placement, and yet be denied the memory of how you got here. You'd think the hosts, or gods, or programmers, or whoever would at least leave you a sticky note. Instead, you get myths, dreams, déjà vu, half glimpses, half truths, teases. You laugh softly, remembering one of the stranger tidbits from history. Pythagoras, the Greek mathematician, claimed he could recall past lives, even identifying details of soldiers who had fought in wars long before his birth. Historians still argue whether he was serious, symbolic, or just eccentric. But even then, thousands of years ago, the memory problem gnawed at thinkers. If placement happened, why don't we remember? The night deepens, and you stretch out once more, eyes heavy. Maybe forgetting was part of the package. Maybe the test of placement isn't to recall where you came from, but to see what you do when you don't know. Maybe the puzzle isn't memory but meaning. And as the stars sharpen above you, you sigh into the darkness, whispering, "I'd still like a hint, though." The veil of forgetting still lingers in your mind, heavy as fog, but your thoughts start bending toward the one place where memory seems to misbehave most: dreams. Every night you shut your eyes, sink into darkness, and suddenly a door cracks open. Sometimes you're back in familiar streets, sometimes you're lost in alien landscapes, sometimes you're flying, falling, or meeting people who shouldn't exist. It's chaotic, absurd, enchanting. But what if dreams aren't just mental housekeeping? What if they're departure signals, leaks, glitches, or even messages reminding you that placement isn't the whole story? You stretch across the meadow grass, letting the cool air brush your cheeks, and recall how scientists insist dreams are products of the sleeping brain, random firings of neurons stitched together into narratives. Emotional processing, memory sorting, problem solving disguised as fantasy. And yes, that makes sense. But then you remember the times dreams felt too sharp, too real, too insistent. Times when you woke up with knowledge you didn't have before, or with emotions too strong to dismiss as random noise. Historians still argue whether ancient traditions of dream divination were superstition, or genuine recognition that something deeper was happening. You chuckle softly, recalling how the Babylonians catalogued dreams on clay tablets, treating them as direct communications from gods. Egyptians believed dreams were visits from the divine, maps of the afterlife. Native American traditions often saw them as visions, guidance for hunters or healers. Even the Greeks had entire temples devoted to dream incubation, where seekers slept in sacred chambers hoping for healing visions. Placement wasn't abstract to them, it whispered nightly, carried on the wings of sleep. Rolling onto your side, you think about how certain dreams repeat across cultures. Falling, flying, being chased, standing naked in front of strangers. Scientists say these are universal fears, wired into the human condition. But fringe thinkers raise eyebrows. Why would the unconscious of billions keep recycling the same imagery? Maybe these archetypal dreams aren't personal at all, but shared messages, broadcasts leaking through the veil, departure signals reminding you that the module isn't your final destination. A quirky detail drifts into your thoughts. Some people claim to dream of places that don't exist, yet when shown photographs of foreign cities later, they recognize streets, buildings, even doorways. Mainstream psychology waves it away as coincidence or false memory. But what if dreams are memory's loophole? Little cracks through which fragments of placement or even other worlds leak into consciousness. Historians still argue whether prophetic dreams reported in ancient texts were lucky guesses or evidence of something stranger. You lie back again, staring at the stars beyond the branches, and think about lucid dreaming. The ability to realize you're dreaming, to seize control, to fly at will, to bend landscapes like clay. What other nightly state gives you that kind of power? Waking life feels rigid, rules locked in place, but dreams let you peek behind the code. Fringe enthusiasts argue that lucid dreaming is practice for navigating realities outside this one, training for the day when the module ends. Mainstream scientists smile politely and say it's just awareness during REM sleep. Still, the experience feels too powerful, too intentional to be dismissed entirely. The night hums with crickets, and you remember a quirky story. Abraham Lincoln supposedly dreamed of his own funeral days before his assassination. Countless people have claimed precognitive dreams, flashes of events that later came true, coincidence, selective memory, or departure signals, hints that the walls of the module are thinner during sleep and sometimes the future bleeds backward through the cracks. Historians still argue whether such accounts should be dismissed or studied more seriously. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the drifting sensations of sleep. The body relaxes, the breath deepens, and suddenly you're elsewhere. The transition itself feels like travel. Ancient cultures often describe dreaming as leaving the body, the soul wandering into other realms. Shamans spoke of dream journeys where they visited spirits or ancestors, returning with knowledge or healing. Maybe those weren't metaphors. Maybe they were reports from travellers slipping briefly out of placement, receiving reminders that the enclosure isn't the only room in the house. You smile faintly, remembering your own strange dreams, the ones that left you unsettled for days, as if someone had left a cryptic note in your pocket while you slept. You wake, and the words dissolve, but the feeling remains. Dreams like that don't just entertain, they insist. They press against you like a finger-tapping glass. Departure signals, nudges. The wind stirs and you think of the connection between sleep and death. Many traditions describe dying as a final dream, a permanent departure from the body. Plato called sleep the cousin of death. Maybe dreams prepare you, little rehearsals for leaving the module entirely. If so, every night is a practice run, a soft exit before the final one. Historians still argue whether funeral rites that invoke dreams are poetic or literal acknowledgements of this link. You laugh softly, remembering a quirky tidbit about Thomas Edison. He used to nap holding a metal ball, which would clatter to the floor and wake him before he slipped fully into sleep. He believed the liminal state between waking and dreaming was fertile ground for ideas. And he was right. Some of his inventions came from those half-dream moments. Maybe he was catching departure signals, brushing fingertips against whatever lies beyond the veil. The meadow glows faintly in the moonlight, and you realize how essential dreaming has always been to art, invention, culture. Paul McCartney claimed the melody for Yesterday came to him in a dream. Dmitri Mendeleev said the periodic tables arrangement appeared in one as well. Countless writers, poets, and scientists credit dreams for breakthroughs. Placement theories would call that leakage, messages slipping through from outside the module. Mainstream science calls it the brain's creative synthesis. Either way, dreams become the nightly reminder that your mind is more porous than you admit. You sigh, stretching out in the grass, and feel the weight of your eyelids again. Maybe the real puzzle isn't why you dream, but why you wake. Each morning you return dutifully to the module, forgetting the signals, brushing them aside like cobwebs. Maybe that's part of the design. Maybe if you remembered too much too clearly, you'd stop playing along, and so you lie there, breathing with the rhythm of the night, aware of the irony. Dreams may be nothing but brain static. Or they may be the most honest messages you ever receive. Either way, they whisper the same possibility. Placement isn't the whole story. You have somewhere else to go. The thought of dreams as departure signals still hums in your mind like the echo of a lullaby. But another pattern emerges the more you sit with it. You realize that even when you're awake, you're restless. Always reaching, building, leaving, searching. No matter how balanced the Earth seems, its food, its gravity, its moonlit nights, humans are never satisfied. Placement gave you a module fit for survival, yet your species spends most of its time trying to escape it. That itch, that tug in the chest. Maybe it's not ambition. Maybe it's homesickness disguised as curiosity. You stand and start pacing through the meadow, noticing how your feet keep pressing forward even when there's no destination. It's almost comic. Ancient nomads trekked endlessly, never content to stay in one valley. Explorers sailed across oceans with little more than wooden hulls and blind hope. Even now, satellites and rovers wander the skies on your behalf. Humans simply can't sit still. Historians still argue whether this restlessness is evolutionary survival instinct or evidence that you were never fully comfortable here. You glance at the horizon and picture the first humans leaving Africa tens of thousands of years ago, spreading across continents like sparks leaping from a fire. They walked into deserts, mountains, tundras, harsh places that should have pushed them back. Instead, they adapted, pressed onward, restless as ever. Why? Was it hunger? Population pressure? Or was it that deep itch of displacement? The quiet suspicion that no matter where you settle, it isn't quite home. You pause beneath a tree leaning against its rough bark and recall a quirky tidbit. Polynesian navigators crossed vast Pacific distances using nothing but stars, currents, and bird flights. They launched into blue emptiness, chasing islands they couldn't see, guided by sheer faith in patterns. Mainstream historians marvel at their skill. Fringe interpreters see something more, an instinct encoded, a memory of placement pushing humans to keep seeking beyond horizons. Historians still argue whether migration was purely necessity or something spiritual, a drive to return somewhere else. You step back into the open meadow and tilt your face skyward. Space, of course, is the latest frontier for that restlessness. Rockets roaring, telescopes scanning, rovers scooping Martian dust. Why spend trillions chasing inhospitable rocks when Earth is already so perfect? The scientific answer: curiosity, progress, survival insurance. But the placement whisper adds another. Maybe you're trying to go home. Maybe deep down you know this module was temporary. The crickets soften their song and you smile faintly, recalling the Cold War's space race. Two superpowers hurling metal capsules into orbit, desperate to be first, as if bragging rights mattered more than food or peace. Neil Armstrong stepping onto the moon wasn't just science, it was theatre. A restless declaration. See, we can leave. And the whole world wept, not because a rock was conquered, but because a door had been cracked open. You lower yourself to the grass again, staring upward, and think about Elon Musk's dream of Mars colonies, Jeff Bezos speaking of millions living in orbiting habitats. Some mock them as billionaires chasing vanity, others cheer them as pioneers. But maybe both are true. The restless itch drives even the most comfortable humans to imagine escape. You can't shake the suspicion that placement feels incomplete if you never leave. A breeze drifts across your face, and you think of the earliest myths again. Heroes rarely stayed home, they journeyed. Gilgamesh leaving Uruk, Odysseus wandering the seas, Moses leading Exodus. Human storytelling itself revolves around restlessness. Stay still too long, and the story stalls. Move, and meaning appears. Historians still argue whether this pattern reflects practical survival or deeper metaphysical longing. You grin, remembering a quirky modern detail, the overview effect astronauts describe when viewing Earth from space. They speak of profound awe, a sense of fragility, a sudden shift in perspective. Seeing the planet as a tiny blue marble makes home feel simultaneously more precious and less sufficient. Some even weep, overwhelmed by the beauty and loneliness. Placement is never clearer than when you leave it, even briefly. The stars brighten overhead, pinpricks of possibility, and you realize your restlessness isn't just about physical travel, it's mental too. Humans invent religions, philosophies, sciences, always trying to peek past the curtain. You dig into atoms, launch telescopes, meditate under trees, paint canvases, write symphonies, always pushing, stretching, reaching for something else. If placement was meant to keep you content, it backfired spectacularly. Or maybe that was the point. Maybe the module wasn't meant to be a permanent cage, but a classroom designed to spark curiosity. The discomfort, the itch, the longing, it keeps you moving, keeps you growing. A pet might be content in its enclosure, but a student has to outgrow the classroom. You laugh softly, whispering, "Well, I guess we're the restless kind of pet." A memory surfaces of the Tower of Babel again, humans building skyward, trying to bridge the gap to heaven. Punished, scattered, but undeterred. Even myth admits it. You're always trying to climb out, always restless, always hungry for more. You turn over onto your back, the meadow grass cushioning you, and sigh. Restlessness isn't comfortable. It gnaws, but it also animates. Without it, you'd still be crouching in caves, shivering by fires. With it, you've crossed oceans, split atoms, and reached space. Whether it's homesickness, ambition, or divine nudge, it's undeniably part of you. And so you lie there, chest rising with steady breath, gazing at stars you'll never touch but can't stop dreaming about. Maybe Earth was placement, but placement came with a flaw, or a feature, restlessness, a built-in whisper that keeps saying, "Don't stop here." Restlessness hums in your chest like a low drum beat, but But as you stare at the stars, another possibility rises, quieter but heavier. What if the point of placement isn't escape, not yet? What if Earth isn't just a habitat or a terrarium, but a classroom? A proving ground? A long, grueling exam in which every hunger, every hardship, every heartbreak is part of the curriculum? You laugh softly at the thought. It sounds like the worst syllabus ever written, and yet the more you think about it, the more it fits. You push yourself upright, grass sticking to your back, and imagine Earth as an elaborate testing centre. The conditions are carefully controlled, enough resources to survive but never enough to guarantee comfort, enough mysteries to inspire but never enough to satisfy. The hosts, or gods, or developers, whoever set this place up, didn't just drop you into paradise, they dropped you into a puzzle. And the test is simple. What will you do with it? You wander slowly toward a grove, and each tree feels like a question on the exam. Will you chop it for firewood or climb it for fruit? Will you carve it into symbols or sit beneath it to think? Placement itself is neutral. The test lies in how you respond. Historians still argue whether humanity's technological leaps were survival necessities or products of this restless examination. Either way, you've been scribbling answers across the planet for millennia. A quirky fact rises in your mind. The ancient Greeks believed life itself was a series of trials, and souls were judged after death in Hades. The Egyptians weighed hearts against a feather to see if they had passed. Even Christianity framed life as a test before heaven. Different cultures, same whisper, you're being graded. Placement wasn't the final gift, it was the test paper. You reach the grove and sit on a fallen log, running your hand along its rough bark. You think about suffering, the great stumbling block for anyone who imagines design. If Earth were placed perfectly, why so much pain? Science explains it as evolutionary indifference, religion as consequence of sin, philosophy as the price of existence. But what if pain is exam material? The pop quizzes you hate, but secretly learn from. Every famine, every flood, every heartbreak. Questions written in sharp ink. Historians still argue whether civilizations grew stronger from crisis or simply survived by accident. But the placement theory reframes it. The long test was never supposed to be easy. You chuckle darkly, whispering, well, they could have at least provided study guides. But then again, maybe they did. Myths, scriptures, philosophies, each a cheat sheet written in different languages pointing toward patience, kindness, endurance. The problem? The test papers don't all match. One says circle A, another says circle C. You've been bickering over answer keys for centuries, perhaps missing the point entirely. Maybe the real test isn't about getting it right, but about how you treat your fellow test takers while fumbling with the questions. The crickets hum louder, and you tilt your head back, considering how restless ambition ties into the exam. Maybe the urge to build rockets, to write symphonies, to split atoms, isn't about escape at all. It's about seeing whether you'll use your gifts responsibly. Do you burn down the classroom, or do you learn enough to graduate? Fringe thinkers sometimes say nuclear weapons are the ultimate test question. Can humanity survive its own intelligence? Mainstream scientists phrase it differently, but the tension is the same. Historians still argue whether modern crises are catastrophes or catalysts. You sigh, remembering another quirky tidbit. In Hinduism, life is described as Maya, illusion, but not meaningless. A school where lessons repeat until learned. Fail the test, and you reincarnate. Pass it, and you transcend. It's a brutal system if you're impatient, but it fits eerily well with the placement suspicion. Earth isn't a reward, it's remedial training. You rise and wander deeper into the grove, the trees crowding closer, shadows thick. The air feels heavier here, like an exam hall where silence presses on your ears. You imagine the hosts or gods or watchers, checking clipboards, marking answers. Did you learn compassion? Did you curb greed? Did you share your bread? Maybe the test isn't about technology at all, but about behaviour. And maybe that's why placement comes with hardship. Without friction, without questions, there's no exam. The ground crunches under your feet and you grin ruefully. If this really is a long test, humans haven't exactly been star pupils. Wars, greed, exploitation, your history books are filled with wrong answers scribbled in blood. But they're also filled with art, love, generosity, moments of brilliance. Maybe the exam isn't pass-fail. Maybe it's graded on a curve. Historians still argue whether progress is real or just an illusion you tell yourselves. Placement makes the debate sharper. Progress or stagnation, answers or guesses, all part of the test. You reach a clearing, moonlight washing the ground pale, and you sit cross-legged, exhaling slowly. The thought isn't entirely grim. Tests, after all, imply growth. They imply a goal. Maybe placement wasn't punishment, but opportunity. A chance to learn, to stretch, to stumble and get up again. A long test, yes, but not endless. One day, perhaps the paper will be collected, the exam hall will empty, and you'll know whether you passed. You smile faintly at the stars above, thinking of school days long gone, those anxious exams where the clock ticked too loud, where your pencil smudged, where the questions seemed designed to trick you. Life feels the same sometimes, but just as often, you remember the relief of finishing, the pride of learning more than you expected. Maybe placement is like that too, hard, unfair, exhausting. But when the bell rings, you'll look back and realize you grew. The night deepens, silence thickening around you. If placement is the long test, then every day is another page, another question, another chance, and whether you ace it or stumble, the point is that you keep writing, you keep showing up, you keep trying. And as your eyes grow heavy again, you can't help but think, maybe the hardest part of the test isn't the questions at all. Maybe it's remembering that you're taking one. The long test weighs on you, like a stack of unfinished exam papers sitting at the edge of your desk. You lean back against the earth, breathing slow, wondering if you'll ever know how you scored. And then, a more electrifying thought stirs in your chest. What if one day the curtain lifts? What if all the whispers, the myths, the glitches, the dreams, suddenly collapse into proof? No more suspicion, no more speculation, just confirmation. The stage lights snap on, the theatre revealed, the audience finally applauding. You sit upright in the meadow, pulse quickening at the thought. Imagine it. A press conference broadcast across every screen, announcing that, yes, placement happened. Maybe it's aliens stepping off a ship with cosmic clipboards. Maybe it's God parting the sky with a dramatic thunderclap. Maybe it's scientists holding up undeniable evidence that Earth was engineered. How would you react? With wonder, with dread, with relief? Probably all three at once, like a cocktail of emotions too strong to swallow. You wander slowly through the grass and the ground feels electric beneath your feet, as if anticipation itself has charged the soil. Wonder would come first, no doubt. The sheer awe of knowing you were right to suspect all along. The myths weren't just campfire stories. The pyramids weren't just tombs. DNA wasn't just chemistry. You'd stare at the revelation like a child seeing fireworks for the first time, dazzled, humbled, maybe even grateful. But dread would be close behind. Because if someone placed you, then someone owns the keys. Someone holds authority over your existence. That realization could chill the marrow. You'd have to ask, are they kind or cruel? Do they see you as student, pet, experiment, or mistake? Historians still argue whether apocalyptic religions reflect humanity's secret fear that the hosts, or God, might eventually return, not with gifts, but with judgment. You reach a cluster of rocks and sit, fingers drumming lightly against the cool stone. Peace might come too, strangely enough, because uncertainty is its own torment. For millennia, humans have bickered over origin stories, fought wars over beliefs, doubted, mocked, and prayed. If the curtain lifted, the arguments would collapse. You'd finally know. The relief of certainty might soothe even as it unsettles. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In 1977, a radio telescope in Ohio detected a strong narrowband signal from space, dubbed the WOW signal. It lasted 72 seconds, never repeated, never explained. Some still argue it was interference, others whisper extraterrestrial message. Imagine if tomorrow a second WOW signal arrived, but this time in perfect binary declaring, yes, you're in the module, signed the hosts. The world would tilt on its axis, not from gravity but from revelation. You grin at the absurdity of it all. Would governments try to suppress the news to maintain control? Would religions rejoice at vindication or tremble at correction? Would scientists weep with joy or curse their ruined theories? Historians still argue whether humanity is prepared for disclosure of any kind, or whether the shock would tear society apart. The crickets drone in the meadow, steady and indifferent, as though mocking your speculation. You think about how daily life might change. Would you still go to work if you knew placement was real? Would school children still memorize equations, or would they demand to know who the teacher really is? Would love, friendship, art, all the tender things, grow deeper with cosmic context, or shrivel under the weight of irrelevance? You lie back again, grass cool under your head, and picture both extremes. One version: humanity panics, riots, collapses. Faith shatters, science convulses, governments crumble. The other version: humanity exhales, at last freed from the endless guessing. People hold hands, inspired by shared wonder. A new golden age dawns. Both feel possible, both feel terrifying. The moon drifts higher, pale and patient, and you realize that maybe the curtain lifting wouldn't be sudden. Maybe it's already happening, bit by bit. Each discovery, each myth, each dream, threads tugged away from the veil. Placement might not end with fireworks and trumpets. It might end with a quiet realization, a collective shrug of recognition. Oh, of course, we were placed. A breeze brushes your skin and you laugh softly at a thought. Maybe the hosts already lifted the curtain once. Maybe prophets, mystics, visionaries glimpsed it and tried to tell everyone else, only to be dismissed as poets or madmen. Historians still argue whether religious revelations were divine truth or neurological quirks. Either way, the possibility lingers that the curtain has always been thin, and you've simply trained yourself not to see through it. You sit up again, pulse calmer now, and consider the strangest possibility of all. Maybe the curtain never lifts. Maybe that's the final twist of placement. The test isn't about discovering who placed you, but about how you behave in the not knowing. The uncertainty is the exam itself. The hosts, if they exist, don't want obedience or worship. They want to see what you'll do when you're unsure, when the rules aren't spelled out, when the questions remain riddles. The night deepens, stars sharpening against black. You exhale slowly, letting the thoughts sink. If the curtain lifted tomorrow, you'd rejoice, you'd tremble, you'd feel peace. But tonight, with the curtain still drawn, you find a different kind of peace in the mystery itself. The wondering is what makes you human. The restless speculation, the myths, the science, the dreams, all of it is placement too. You smile faintly at the sky, whispering, maybe that's the answer. Maybe the curtain never needs to lift because the wondering was the point all along. And with that, you sink into the silence, the night wrapping you like a curtain of its own, waiting for the next act, whether revealed or not. The night stretches endless now, the stars dimming into a gentle haze, as if the sky itself is lowering the lights for you. You've walked through myths and monuments, spirals of DNA and restless journeys, through doubts and dreams and the quiet suspicion of being watched. Each step has tugged at the same thread, the same shimmering question: what if you were placed here? But now, at the edge of the journey, the question doesn't feel sharp anymore. It feels soft, like the hum of a lullaby you don't need to finish to enjoy. Your body sinks deeper into the earth's cushion, and the ground seems to rise just slightly to meet you, as if holding you in place. The crickets fade into the background, no longer a chorus, just a hush. Even the breeze slows down, brushing your cheek with the tenderness of someone smoothing a blanket. Placement, test, simulation, host. None of it feels urgent now. It's all just part of the same dreamscape, a story to keep your mind company while sleep tiptoes closer. Imagine the curtain lifting, not with a blaze of truth, but with a gentle dimming, like the theatre of the world lowering its stage lights. You don't need every answer tonight. You don't need to solve the puzzle. It's enough to know you are here, breathing steadily, cocooned in questions that have lasted longer than empires. The very act of wondering is its own kind of belonging. So let your eyelids fall heavier. Let the meadow, the stars, the quiet earth around you fade into a blur. You are safe, placed exactly where you need to be for now. The test can wait until tomorrow. For tonight, simply rest, simply drift, simply dream.